OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
7:30 on this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. Eoin and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And it is Laois Mt Rushmore Day, the big one coming your way later on. They're all the big one, really. Cliona, Foley and Shane Keegan will be with us to pick their four names for the Laois Mt Rushmore. Alan Quinlan will be with us later on as well. There's some new news this morning in the Telegraph about potential summer rugby coming over the next couple of years. We'll get his take on that. And we've also got an interview this morning with Aaron Cunningham. That's coming up at around 8:30. So Aaron Cunningham, if you don't know his story, he was racially abused while playing for Crossmaglen in 2012, and he's since moved to the United States and has been part of the wave of protests in New York over the past couple of weeks. So a really interesting chat. We recorded it just before we came on air, and that's coming your way in about an hour's time. Adrian, Barry, how are things?
Flying around, thank you.
It seems that every Friday we come off air, the world changes, and in the next 7 days we're catching up on all the crazy stuff that have happened. By my count, I'd say the reporter in Minneapolis was just about to get arrested when we came off air last week, and we started to realise, oh, this is going to be a fairly historic weekend, and so it turned out to be.
Yeah, it's mad. I was only thinking just before I came on air that, like, what does it take now, particularly in the US, to actually shock you in relation to what's going on there, and obviously in relation to the guy who's, I was going to say leading the country, but in charge of the country. It just seems so ridiculous, and it seems like that people are being empowered almost to give outward voice to some pretty ludicrous and outrageous thought and opinion in not a great format. Like, we'll get into it with Aaron a bit later on, but like the idea that you can ignore, or the idea that these people don't exist, or you can somehow ignore them, or you can somehow quash those ideologies simply is a difficult thing. It's in that context. I mean, I just what's going on over there, what's been going on over there and over here for years. I know you guys obviously were having conversations as well about it during the week. It's not an easy thing to get around. The sports part in it is also a very interesting area. Like you mentioned the Kilcoo stuff back at the back end of 2012. And Aaron was racially abused by a player from Kilcoo and by somebody from the supporter, let's call them as well, who was given a life ban. The player was given a 4-month ban, which was December to April, which was, as Aaron himself said at the time, a glorified holiday. Like, the role of bans in all of this, I think, is an interesting one. Like, the pointlessness of it. It seems so totally pointless that, like, it's a real kind of a back page headline, isn't it? Like, you know, player given 4-month ban for racist abuse. But what does it actually achieve, really?
Well, it is interesting when you mention some of the other conversations we've been having on the show about this topic this week. Like Gina Akpomoses in particular has spoken brilliantly about how there is an implied racism often in the behaviour of people in Ireland, and it's not outward racism at times, but it is still racism. It is interesting that Cunningham has been a victim of quite blatant racism, and that sport actually ended up bringing the worst out of that particular individual or that particular group of people, as it turned out to be the case.
I think that my experience of living in this country and for short periods in other countries is that as a white male frequently, and this is maybe the most concerning aspect of it, as a white male you actually see more of the racism than a person of colour perhaps might be likely to see, because I definitely find in this country that there's almost a willingness to, like, a quick willingness to be racist, and the understanding of racism in itself, a topic that comes up with Aaron a bit later on, that people are very quick to assume that you're on board with their racism. And so I think if you are somebody who's, as we said a bit earlier on, it's not something that you can wave a magic wand at or fix at the click of a fingers, but certainly in terms of things that people can do, that when you are in the company of somebody who, let's face it, of our profile, who comes with that privilege, that the onus is on you obviously to take that on. But so I do frequently find that actually, I mean, you know, we're not dealing with the same, you know, the abuse obviously that people would get, like we're talking about Aaron obviously in relation to that, but certainly that quiet racism I would have seen lots of over the years.
Yeah, it's a great piece. We recorded it, as I say, about an hour ago, and it's coming your way at 8:55 this morning. Around that then, it's Alan Quinlan at 8:40, and then Mt Rushmore for all you Laois people is coming up at 9:20. We'll also have the sports pages, Shane Hannon with the sports news at 8:10, and Adrian will be sifting through his match programme from the 2007 game between Ireland and England at Croke Park. It is this weekend's Classic Game Club, so more on that coming your way in about 20 minutes' time. But before that, John Giles named his all-time Scotland 11 on last night's Off the Ball. You can check out the full team on the brand new OTB Sports app. But here is John going through his team.
There used to be a lot of joking about the lack of quality of Scottish goalkeepers, but you have a short list of Andy Gorm, David Harvey, Alan Ruff and Jim Leighton.
Yes.
Who have you gone for?
I've gone for David Harvey.
Right.
David, I played with him at Leeds.
Yeah.
Very, very solid goalkeeper, Nathan. Took over from Gary Sprague, who had been having a bad time. You know, I think when Don was struggling early on in his career, he put a lot of young lads in, and one of those included Gary Sprague, who did very, very well for him. And then he got to a stage, Gary was making a lot of mistakes, and I think Don was being loyal to him. I think he should have been out of the team before. I think his nerves went on him, Nathan. And funny enough, we were playing Birmingham in the semi-final of the Cup in 1972. And a big surprise to us all, Don left Gary Sprague out and brought Dave Harvey in. And Gary never got back into the team again. Mm. So he was very solid, David. He wasn't spectacular. A lot of great goalkeepers in those days, Pat Jennings and Shilton and these guys. He wouldn't have been in that bracket, but he was very, very good and very solid.
16 caps for Scotland. He played for Scotland in the 1974 World Cup. Very unfortunate, though, with Leeds. Picked up a bad injury, had an accident, and should have been first choice for that Leeds side that reached the European Cup semi-final in 75 and ended up missing out. Yes.
I was quite close with him. I used to room with him. And he was out one night and he crashed the blooming car on Nathan. And then he couldn't play for the rest of the season. But he was very, very, very solid, very good goalkeeper.
Did you like to have the one roommate over the course of the season, or did you rotate, or were there certain people you had room with quite a bit?
Mostly Dave. I think when you had a room like Norman Hunter was in with Terry Cooper and Billy Bremner was in on Clark. So yeah, we got settled in like that.
Yeah,
Nathan. Although all the lads and these lads got on well together anyway, you know.
Yeah. And did you like rooming with someone who'd be up chatting to you for half the night, or
no? Did
you want to be left alone?
No, left alone and go to sleep. Go to sleep early. It was well, as you know, Nathan. In football, it's no good having good nights of sleep Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then it comes to Friday, and you don't sleep the night before the match, which is the most important one of the lot. I used to take a couple of sleeping tablets to make sure, Nathan, you know, because it was vital to get a good night's sleep before the match. But Dave didn't keep me awake at all.
Yeah. Well, on the sleeping tablets, would you have been someone who got nervous then ahead of big matches, that you'd be worried that actually you wouldn't get a good night's sleep?
Well, that was it. You know, it didn't matter to me whether it was a big match. I used to take it was a regular habit Friday night or the night before the match, Nathan, because that's when you need a good night's sleep. As I said, it's no good sleep if you're playing on Saturday. It's no good sleep Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and you don't sleep Friday night. It's all gone to waste, to be quite honest. So it's just to make sure that you get a good night's sleep. It wasn't nerves or anything, you know. I mean, it was just to make sure that you did get a sleep, you know.
So David Harvey's your goalkeeper. You've gone with 3 centre halves. We'll talk about some of the full backs in a while and who may have gone if you'd gone with 4 at the back. But what you've done again is you've divided them into certain groups, and you can talk about some of the players as we go along and who you've selected. So your first grouping of centre halves: Ron Yates, Alan Hansen, Frank McClintock and Alec McLeish.
Yes, and I've gone for Alan Hansen.
Hansen only won 26 caps for Scotland. Wasn't even included in the squad for the 86 World Cup.
No.
I know there were various different reasons, and there were injuries, and there were some falling outs along the way. Like at that period, was Hansen comfortably the best centre half in English football in the 80s?
Yeah, I was surprised. I think there was a big fallout. I think Alex Ferguson had something to do with that, with Kenny Dalglish at that particular time. I don't know what it was. There was a bit of a fallout anyway at that time that he wasn't picked. But what you used to find a lot, Nathan, in those days, lads who moved down to England from Scotland gave up a lot of chances to be picked. I mean, the great Dave Mackay got 22 caps.
Yeah.
Eddie Gray got 22 caps. I think Peter Lorimer got 20-odd caps. So it was no coincidence. I think at that time, for a lot of the time anyway, you had a selection committee who always favoured the lads playing left to play in Scotland.
Hanson was in your all-time Liverpool team as well.
Yeah, I think it was great. I thought Hanson was a great player. And again, like we talked about Beckenbauer and that, Nathan, he made it look easy. You know, he seemed to be strolling through a match because, again, when he was on the ball at the back, if somebody got too tight, if he had a good change of pace, he didn't look like it, you know. But he was very calm on the ball, because he obviously knew he had the space and could distribute it well. And obviously playing in a great team, his distribution didn't have to be great because you had Souness and Dalglish and all these players around him. But no, he was a terrific player, Alan Hanson.
That must just suck the confidence out of so many strikers as well when you're up against a centre half who is that calm, is unflappable, that you feel no matter what you do, no matter how many runs you make, that they're not going to lose their composure, they're not going to switch off.
No. And getting on the ball. I mean, a lot of defenders, like Big Jack said at Leeds, he was a great defender, but he wasn't that easy on the ball. Whereas Hanson was, Hanson could take it out, no problem. He could be looking up, and like all great players, had plenty of time on the ball, or seemed to have plenty of time on the ball. Now he was top notcher, and obviously a very, very good defender.
So Alan Hanson, I guess, an automatic selection in any Scotland team. Your next grouping, Willie Miller, Billy Mcneill, Gordon McQueen and Colin Hendry. Who have you gone for?
Yeah, I've gone for Billy Mcneill.
Right, the ultimate one-club man. Yeah,
well, he was Mr. Celtic and a good leader, Nathan. You know, he was an old-fashioned centre-half, you would say today. Big lad, really good in the air, okay on the ground, but didn't try to do anything spectacular on the ground, knew his limitations and gave it to the players that could play, as they say, the managers used to say in those days. So very seldom made a mistake. Good-hearted lad, played for the team and really, really top-notch.
You mentioned Hanson coming down there to play in England. A player of Billy Mcneill's status and stature maybe never wanted to, because, listen, they literally have a statue of him outside of Celtic Park. When you were playing in England, would you have been very much aware of his talents and a player who you thought could come down and play at the very highest level in English football as well?
Oh, he could have done, Nathan. But you get a lot of lads, especially in Rangers Celtic, that love the club. And I think he was one of those lads actually loved the club. He was a long time there as a player and then came as a manager. I think he 2 spells as a manager. So they do fall in love with the club, and the fans fall in love with them. You know, he captained the team when they won the European Cup and that. So he was very, very much attached to the club. And you get some players like that they're few and far between. And he would have been a hero with the Celtic fans for what he did for the club over the years. In terms of
the style of player he was he a different style of player to Hanson? Was it more of a heart of the line, put your body on the line wherever possible? Yeah, he wouldn't have been as comfortable looking, or he wasn't comfortable as comfortable on the ball as Hanson was. There weren't many as comfortable as him anyway. But he was the old-fashioned centre half, really good in the air, won tackles, blocked shots, did all the things that you would expect big centre halves to do, and he did them. And I think he was a big leader in that particular team. Yeah. All right, so Billy Mcneill again, just the 29 caps for Billy Mcneill, albeit at a time when they were probably harder to earn. Your final centre half then for the back three, your shortlist is Kenny Burns, Martin Buchan, Richard Gough and Matt Elliott. Yeah, I've gone for Richard Gough. Right. I thought he was a good all-round player, Nathan. He was only 1 year at Spurs and then went back to Rangers. But he was a demanding type of player. He was quite mobile, covered the ground well, used the ball well. Again, especially a good centre half or good player at the back. Really good blocker of shots, getting good tackles in, but was comfortable enough on the ball to take it out. Like Billy Mcneill, a big leader as well of his club. Captained Rangers to their 9 in a row. That 1 year he was at Spurs, brought them to an FA Cup final. Yeah. played in 2 World Cups with Scotland as well. Like, when you're throughout this run of picking all-time 11s, when you're thinking of your centre halves and the common traits that they generally had, like, did you want a centre half who was very vocal, who was very loud, who was always, you felt, fully in command of the rest of the back four?
Yeah, well, what happened with Billy Mcneill and these guys? You said in those days there wasn't as much playing out from the back. You know, you usually had a big centre forward, and you were getting up the centre forward. So they had to. The centre halves in those days had to win an awful lot of ball in the air, and these particular players could do that. Especially Billy Mcneill. Alan Hansen wasn't great. He was okay in the air, but he wasn't regarded as the big centre half. You know. Whereas Billy Mcneill and the other lads, the big centre halves, come and win it and get the tackles in. You know, really defending. You know, a lot of it now, as you see, they're playing out from the back, Nathan, a lot. And you have to be like a midfield player now to be a defender nowadays, which I think it's overdone. I think the main thing is defending and be good enough to give it to players who were in the middle of the field who could do it on the ball. But that's the way times have changed. But these guys playing in those days, Billy Mcneill and Alan Rufford, were that type of player. Win it.
Let's get on to the midfield then, John. And again, we've some little groupings here and you're going to select one from them. First up, we have Jim Baxter, Bobby Murdoch, Paul McStay, Billy Bremner and Paddy Crerand.
Yeah. I've gone for Billy Bremner.
How important was his Scottishness to Billy Bremner? I know he captained them at the 74 World Cup, over 50 caps. Well, that Scottish heritage, was it something you spoke about often?
Billy, yeah. Billy spoke about it a lot, often, especially playing with Scotland. I was very proud. He was very proud of it, as most of the Scottish lads were in my time. Eddie Gray, Peter Lorimer, and these lads, and we had a few of them: Gordon McQueen and Joe Jordan. All loved playing for Scotland. But Billy was, he was a real Scot. He was a real Scot. He enjoyed it. Nathan.
You've spoken about him often down through the years and your partnership in the middle of midfield for Leeds and just how great a player he was. When you were in the midst of it, when you're in the thick of that time together at Leeds, were you always aware of just how good he was? Oh yeah.
Well, Billy was an outstanding player, and Billy he's certainly one of the most confident players I ever met in my life, Nathan. Even before a match, you know, you'd be quiet. Well, I would, and most lads would be quiet. Billy'd be hopping around. Billy expected to be a star of every game, Nathan. And a lot of the games he was. Yeah. But that was his attitude. You know, I never saw him nervous, always bouncing around. A bloody nuisance in the dressing room sometimes, you know. Because sometimes, I was quiet, and Norman Hunter, a few of the lads would be quiet. He'd be hopping around. I don't know where he got the energy from. And he's saying when he trained, like Billy wasn't a good trainer. The horse country's run, and him and Big Jack were always last. And he wasn't really true, but put a ball out, and he'd come to life. Like, he'd stay there all day, playing and staying on the pitch. You know, Billy expected and was a star in every game that he played. Unbelievable confidence.
How did he deal with the games when he wasn't the star, when things didn't go right for him?
I never remember him reacting when it didn't go right for him. Do you know what I mean? I never ever heard him say, "Wasn't my day today." Right. No, he'd unbelievable confidence in himself, Nathan, and then plenty to say on the pitch to the opposition and that.
As you say there, pre-match at times, yourself and himself probably very different personalities.
Oh yeah, totally different.
Would you have rubbed each other up the wrong way from time to time? Would you have clashed often?
No, not really. No. We didn't clash on the pitch at all. Like Billy was, what would I say? He'd especially when the goal down, Billy'd want to get up around the edge of the box, and I'd be sort of more calm. Look, Billy, hang on, just keep playing. And because the goals he scored, the dramatic goals he scored, were incredible, Nathan. Semi-finals, finals. You know, I won't give you a list of them, but I think 3 of the semi-finals we got to Wembley, he scored the winning goals. You know, and good goals, important goals. You know, like he'd get. He was goal scoring midfield and plenty of energy. His energy was unbelievable, bouncing around. Like in those days, you didn't have to hold the midfield. Billy Bremner missed out the midfield players. Well, I was lucky enough to score 115 goals. He scored 115 goals from midfield. Now, a lot of mine were penalties, but his was just dramatic goals and important goals, Nathan.
In a way, you were probably lucky to find each other at the same club at the same time, because everything you've ever said about the way you played together, you complemented each other so well, whether it is personality, whether it was skill-wise, that you both knew your role for the team. It was quite a similar role at times, and there was no real ego involved with either of you.
No, we just had to get on. Well, when you're playing together in the middle of the field like we did, you react to each other, Nathan. You know, like I knew what Billy was going to do before he knew what I was going to do. That's how you get a combination going in the middle of the field. But he could win the ball as well. There was no hanging around with him. Like he was just a bundle of energy, Nathan.
So Billy Bremner, an automatic selection in midfield. Let's move on. The next shortlist: John White, Bobby Hope, John Craig, Graham Souness and George Graham.
Yeah, I've gone for Graham Souness.
This is already shaping up to be the toughest midfield of any of the 11s you've picked so far.
Yeah. Well, these are all Scottish lads, born and bred in Scotland, and Scotland with great tradition, as we know, for breeding players anyway. But Graham, I think, really found his way at Liverpool. I know he was at Spurs. I think he got impatient there and went to Middlesbrough, which was a good grounding for him. But when he went to Liverpool, I think they were made for each other. Graham commanded the middle of the field. He had plenty of confidence in himself. Different to Billy Bremner, he wasn't quite as good at beating players around it. He wasn't particularly quick, Graham, but a great presence, great distributor of the ball, and whether the game was tough or easy, he wanted the ball. You know, you've often heard of the Sunshine Boys, Nathan, the fellas who are winning, they're winning 5-0, and give me the ball, they can't get enough of it. You know, if they're losing 1-0 at home, you don't see them. Graham wasn't a Sunshine Boy. He was anything but. He would take responsibility. He had plenty to say on the pitch. Could dish it out, Nathan, as well. But a top-class player.
The Sunshine Boys that you talk about, like all the great teams, didn't have too many of them, and they all had a Graham Souness style figure that and it's always going to get tough at some stage in sport and in football, someone you can rely on. Everything you ever say about Souness, that like that Liverpool team, in hindsight you'd almost look back and you'd feel they won every game quite convincingly. What wasn't the case. There was tough games, and Souness was there front and centre every single time. Definitely.
I mean, the Sunshine Boys, they go missing, Nathan. You know, Liverpool, like all the great teams, don't carry a Sunshine Boy. You know, if you look at all the winning teams, it doesn't matter who they are. And to Liverpool this year, you could see somebody messing around the Liverpool team, and you see Klopp, you take his head off. You know, and on reviews, all the top managers, they just wouldn't be in the club for 2 minutes if they were a Sunshine Boy. Get them out of the club. And Graham brought that determination and control with him into what was a successful Liverpool team anyway. So no, Graham was top notch.
You would have played against them. I don't know if he played when he was with Middlesbrough.
Yes.
Could you see the signs there that this player was going to go on and become one of the great midfielders of his time?
Oh yeah, he was on his way. He was only starting off. I had a couple of clashes with him. I played against him at Leeds, Nathan, and he was down the back of my legs, and you know, and then when you get that, you don't say anything. But I was in an incident with him at Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
And I copped him. I'm not bragging about it, but I copped him on it. And he went crackers with me. He went crackers. He said, I'll break your effing leg. And I said, well, we'll see about that, Graham, you know. But we were good pals after that. Now, Graham could dish it out.
Yeah.
He could dish it out. No doubt about that. And he had to take it as well, you know.
Knowing that he could dish it out and knowing that you could dish it out from time to time, was any part of you worried in the years that followed when you come up against him again that he'd be eyeing up revenge?
I don't think I only want to come up against him in a League of Ireland match, actually. I was playing for the League of Ireland against Liverpool in a friendly match at Dalymount. And actually, it was one of the lads who played in midfield with me. I can't think of his name now. But he copped Graham. And Graham thought it was me. And he said, that's the second time you've caught me. I'm going to do you in. Graves. He was raging, you know, coming on. Well, it had nothing to do with me. but that's the way it was.
Yeah, and when you ended up working together years later on the television.
Once the matches, funny enough, now Tim, all that happened on the pitch.
Yeah,
and some of it was pretty bad stuff. But once the match was over, that was the end of it.
Yeah.
I never held like a personal thing, or nobody held a personal thing against me. It was all part of the game. You give it, you take it, you know.
Let's move on, because we don't want to run out of time here.
Okay.
Your next selection, then, you have a short list of Archie Gemmell, he of the Wonder Goal, Bertie Auld, Dave Mackay, Gordon Strachan, Don Masson.
Yeah, I've gone for Dave Mackay.
Yeah.
The great Dave Mackay.
One of the great all-rounders. Could have picked him in a few different positions here.
He was one of the greats, and I don't mention great very lightly. Actually, I made my debut against him, Nathan. He was playing with Spurs. The Spurs, he'd just come down from Scotland, and they were going on to the great years. That was in 1959. They didn't win it in 59, but they went on in 1960 and 61 to win the double and all the trophies they won. But he was the driving force in that team. And they used to say with Danny Blanchflower, like Danny was the artist and Dave was the killer, like. But Dave had as much ability as Danny Blanchflower did. He could score goals. He was all over. Like if you were playing on the right wing, you held the ball long enough, Dave Mackay would be tackling you. If you're on the left wing, he'd be tackling him as well. A bundle of energy, but could really play and drive the players on. Nathan, yeah, he was a real player, you know.
So your last selection then from midfield, the shortlist: John Collins, Asa Hartford, Gary McAllister, Bobby Collins, Paul Lambert.
I've gone. Who have I gone for there?
You were saying
Bobby Collins. Oh, sorry, Bobby Collins. How could I forget Bobby Collins? Bobby Collins was great. Bobby Collins was a great player for Celtic. He came down to Everton for a season, then came to Leeds. Bobby Collins was 75% responsible, I think, for the success and the future of the Leeds team. That's how good he was. An old pro, and you can't beat an old pro with their attitude. This is with Norman Hunter, Paul Madeley, Paul Reaney, Terry Cooper, Eddie Gregg, young fellas coming on. This was a guy to train and do what's needed to be done to become a pro, to become a player. And Bobby Collins was responsible in many ways, a great way, for the eventual success of the Leeds team.
When eventually you succeeded him in the middle of midfield alongside.
Well, he was great. Yeah, he was great for me, Nathan. I went to Leeds when I was 22, and I played to the right hand side mostly. You know, Bobby was in the middle, and that was my natural position. So, but when I left Manchester United, I was only 22, and the previous season, don't go too much on it. I had a bad time in the semi-final of the Cup, but Matt lost confidence in me. I was trying to do what Bobby Collins could do when I was too young. So when I went to Leeds, I had 2 years as an apprentice, I would say, to Bobby Collins. Bobby got injured and I took over from him. But I needed that couple of years to be able to do what needed to be done. But Bobby Collins was a great example to all the young players and to Leeds United.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB's Mt Rushmore. 32 counties. One county representative choosing their sporting Mt Rushmore. Some decisions are easy.
I mean, it takes 2.5 days to read Johnny Mutta's Wikipedia. It goes on and on and on.
Others are controversial.
Colossus of a man. But should he go up on the side of a mountain? No, Tommy, no. I cannot have Graham Geraghty.
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
It's very, very special, believe me. And you can say it's grand. It's not grand if you're not on it, though. Unfortunately, inside me, that's ultra competitive and I need to be there.
And catch the live decision-making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
Missing this?
This is the dream. Sheahan on Ringload. Whether you're from Cushendall in Antrim or Mount Sion in Waterford, this is what it's all about.
And get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free, ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
Welcome back to OTB AM. It is 8 o'clock on this Friday morning. So tonight we've got a classic game club coming up on Virgin Media Sport on TV. It's Ireland against England in 2007 at Croke Park. It's going to be myself, Ger, and Adrian Barry doing the honours. Looking back at the game during the week, Adrian, was a fairly pleasurable experience for us all. But for you in particular, it meant kind of reaching into the depths of, I don't know where you keep your memorabilia, but you plucked out the match programme and found a lot of nice stuff in it.
I knew this shit would come in handy at some point, Owen. I have like a drawer full of match programmes here that for a lifetime I've been wondering, should I just put them in the bin? Like, are they really any use to me? I have a few match programmes from various games I would have gone to, kind of tickets, accreditations, all of that stuff. This one was actually, I was not working at it around that time. I would have been working at most of these games, so that in itself was a bit of an achievement. But yeah, the match programme from 2007, I'm leafing through it here, and just as I do it, I'm sort of wondering if I should actually get my paws off it and sort of put it in a frame at some point. But listen, we'll see about that on. It's an interesting read, €5, pretty good price, I think, for a game of its history.
Yeah, the end of the Celtic Tiger.
Yeah, not quite. It was like 2 a.m. for the Celtic Tiger. It was sort of, the party was still in full swing, and they thought it was going to last for days and days and days.
That's what I mean. It's like the peak of the Celtic Tiger, I should say, just right before the end. So €5 is good value given the times that you did live in.
There are elements of this that are going to be very twee in years to come, like it is only 13, 14 years ago. But one of those ones that's already become a little bit twee is the Heinz have an advert here, and they've taken the unusual step of just printing out the words to the Fields of Athenry, as if people, it comes up over the course of the Classic Game Club where Ger feels that, it's a stadium jam-packed full of hardcore rugby fans. Well, the Heinz ad suggests that maybe this is not exactly the case. And you can see at the very bottom there, if you squint and pinch your screen, you can see lyrics courtesy of H.J. Heinz. You have yourself scratching your head, as it's followed by words and music by Pete St. John, as Heinz have really inserted themselves into the I was going to say a bad word there, into the Fields of Athenry, quite incredibly. And I do wonder, like, when it started to ring out towards the end of the game, like how many people in the match programme out and they were like pelting it out. I mean, maybe not that many.
Well, maybe it was the longest Fields of Athenry ever. You could have got a second or third verse, which the song never tends to get to in the stadium. Of course, people who hate the song would have loved that opportunity to educate themselves and learn the lyrics off and just join in on the festivity.
That's become a very new phenomenon, this hatred of the Fields of Athenry. Plenty of other good stuff as well. I mean, it was a time where the anticipation, obviously, for the Rugby World Cup was fever pitch, I'm going to say, and there was a lot of references to it, including this ad is not aged well, from rtho7.com, who I haven't really heard of very much since, I'd have to admit. Experienced the excitement of Rugby World Cup 2007 in France. I mean, if ever there was some false advertising, this was it. I mean, how many people actually went ahead and bought that ultimate rugby experience, a wide range of hospitality on and travel packages on offer at Rugby World Cup, all of which will be creative, innovative and original, but it doesn't say the rugby is going to be shit.
I do wonder if that is why Ireland ended up getting caught in an industrial estate, because literally the take-up for those hospitality packages had been through the roof, and all the
rtho7.com were just too successful.
They'd taken up all the good hotel rooms, and Ireland were stuck in a terrible hotel, which essentially cost them their place in the World Cup quarter-final.
I mean, you could be right. It was where all our problems started. Little do we realise this match programme ruined our World Cup. All those GA fans buying packages to the Rugby World Cup that we never even knew were in the ground. Right, there's a few ads that, just to wrap this thing up, that I wanted to sort of very briefly mention. One of them, he's just a handsome man. He's in his prime. He's endorsing Newbridge silverware. You already know it's going to be. There he is. It's Ronan O'Gara with like a shirt on him for giant haystacks, to be fair. Look at the size of that cuff. Look at the size of that cuff. that is an oversight. That cuff has never adorned the body of Ronan O'Gara in any kind of capacity that didn't involve a photo shoot. Like that is an oversized cuff right there. But I mean, it's a good cuff link. It's a nice cuff link. Would I buy one off the back of it? Possibly. Come at the hour, come at the man. I mean, if ever there was a truer statement, and indeed even in that game.
If you're making a menswear ad or a jewellery ad targeted towards men, you probably don't veer too far off that track. That is the definition of how you do it. And it still is,
You get your cuffs out on and you oversize the shit out of them. And you make sure that, with the cuff, the cuff probably stands out just as well on a shirt that Ronan Garman might actually wear. It's a ludicrous. The cuff, if we can see it again, actually takes up statistically a third of the advert. It is an enormous cuff. So obviously we were to see over the years to come the rivalry between that handsome man and another handsome man in the shape of Johnny Sexton, who was really wouldn't have been that well known about at this point. And again, if you squint and pinch your screen there, just second out from the right hand side, you can see a tense looking Johnny Sexton in the lineup for an under-20s match, and an ad for PricewaterhouseCoopers, who were at that point, and I believe still, sponsoring the Ireland under-20s. More important than how everything works is how everything works together. A fresh-faced Johnny Sexton on.
I think condensing it down to PwC was probably a good branding decision in the end. Like, how wide were those under-20s jerseys at the time to actually get the entire thing in? It's an amazing article that you got there.
Size fits all.
Anything else from inside the pages?
Yes, the last thing that we have to end on, there should be some sort of a special award, and maybe there was. The person who came up with the idea of Big Mal in bed with a laptop and to put it in the match programme. I don't know how much more needs to be said about this, but we're told that thanks to HP Ireland, the innovative video streaming technology provided to the RFU, training sessions can now take place. This is, I'm assuming this is what they're suggesting Big Mal is doing on the laptop, can take place whenever and wherever players like Malcolm O'Kelly feel most comfortable. He certainly looks at 12:36 a.m. the perfect time, it says, for a line-out session. I don't know if that's a euphemism for anything else, but regardless, it's what Big Mal is doing at 12:30 in the morning. He's in bed with his bathrobe on, and a little cup of tea by his bedside, and the laptop out, and he's hard at it.
Well, literally, they were 13 years ahead of the curve there, training sessions from home and all of that. Malcolm O'Kelly, well ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I'm sure. A Big Mal didn't feature that day. He wasn't in the match day squad. He was done out of it by Donegal Callahan. Mick O'Driscoll was on the bench. He would have been coming towards the, if not having passed the end of it, he would have been past the end. It would have been, his career was over. His Ireland career was over, I'm pretty sure, at that point. It was post, probably quite a few years, in fact, but post that time where Declan Kidney. No, it wasn't. I don't know actually what he was doing. I don't know why maybe he was injured. It was before the Declan Kidney, taking him aside and telling him that, listen, you just haven't been yourself about the place, as a euphemism for your time here is done.
Well, it's going to be a good one tonight. It's Classic Game Club on Virgin Media Sport at 8 o'clock, Ireland against England, the 07 game, where Shane Horgan scores the most famous try in Irish rugby history. Shane Horgan, who wasn't good enough to make it onto the Meath Mount Rushmore. Let us not forget. That very Shane Horgan. Shane Hannon, good morning.
Good morning, lads. My word, the thought of that Mal O'Kelly ad is quite terrifying, to say the least.
Is there anybody that you could be not terrified by in a bathrobe in their bed with a HP laptop on their lap? No,
that's it's a disturbing thought. And the cufflinks on Rog as well. I thought that the purpose of cufflinks were to make your shirt wrists a little bit smaller, but an interesting photo. Yeah,
it's more of an ad for Louis Copeland than it is for Newbridge, I felt.
Yeah, I'm glad though, Adrian, you're collecting the programmes. I'm the same myself, but I always kind of die a little bit inside when you see the old guys at GA matches that use the programmes to keep their heads dry when the rain kicks in. It actually makes me sad a little bit. So they pay the money for the programme, and then the rain comes in, and then they just destroy it. You have to throw the programme in the pocket when that happens. You have to hold on to these things as a little bit of memorabilia, but some of those guys just don't. They don't get it like you and I, Adrian.
Yeah, well, they also don't have wardrobes full of match programmes that they will never ever see. Shane is the other. So in some ways, my hat is off to them.
What is the intention with the programmes down the line? Is it to throw them all out, Adrian, eventually? And
no, I have. What was the first Triple Crown we had done in like 40 years? It was in the early 2000s. It might have been 03 or 04, and I have those. My first intention, to be absolutely honest with you, was to gather those match programmes, this is obviously now at this point the best part of 20 years later, and put them into a frame at that stage, because we weren't in the habit of winning anything at all, and a Triple Crown was a massive deal. I'm still going to do this at some point, but was to put them into a frame and stick them up on the wall. So actually, maybe today should be the incentive for me to go and do that. I'd have some, if not all, match programs from 09 as well. So maybe this is something I should do. That was the intention of it. And then you kind of start to go to games, and like Shane says, you're there anyway. You have the ticket. Like, frequently you're at a game and you don't really understand the significance of it, like that 07 game that we're talking about later on, until the passing of time. So, like, why not hang on to it for a few years and just see?
Shane, we're starting this morning with the Premier League.
Yep, kicking off with a bit of Premier League news this morning, lads. Clubs have agreed in principle to play matches at neutral venues. It's after concerns were raised by the police over certain fixtures potentially being a risk to public safety. Shareholders have also voted to increase the number of substitutes for these games. Managers will now be able to make 5 changes in each game, with 9 players allowed on the bench, socially distancing, of course. Tottenham Hotspur have borrowed £175 million from the Bank of England to help them battle the financial effects of the football shutdown. It follows the club saying they expect to lose £200 million of revenue in the next year. Some on-the-pitch news: Chelsea appear to have won the race to sign Timo Werner. Striker has scored 24 times in 29 Bundesliga matches and has been a long-term target, of course, for Liverpool. However, their unwillingness to pay RB Leipzig's €60 million release clause this summer has left the door ajar for Chelsea. Werner is expected to sign a 5-year contract at Stamford Bridge. Some golf. Former Ryder Cup captain Paul McGinley has questioned whether Rory McIlroy's decision to publicly air his political viewpoints could negatively impact his golf game. This is in conversation with Off the Ball. Many sports people have publicly addressed the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. McGinley shared his belief that the Down native's sporting ambitions may be better served if he adopted the approach Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan and others used at the height of their respective careers. That full piece with McGinley, Paul McGinley, that is up on OTBsports.com, and of course the new OTB Sports app available for download right now in the Google Play Store or App Store. Some rugby news this morning. RFU Chief Executive Bill Sweeney has revealed extending the Six Nations is one of the options being looked at if the autumn internationals can't take place. England are due to play New Zealand, Tonga, Australia and Argentina in November. Ireland have plenty of games scheduled for that period as well. But with doubts around travel restrictions, contingency plans are being made. The FEI have accepted Bohemians' apology for minor breaches of their training guidelines. Bohs admitted they made an error in allowing 2 groups of 3 players to train at Father Collins Park in Donamead. The club insists they were following all other guidelines, said they'd follow the FEI's advice ahead of collective training resuming for the 4 European qualified teams next week. Today's expected government announcement of the continuation to Phase 2 of the GAA roadmap will bring good news for the Gaelic Games. Its expected pitches with perimeter walkways will be available to reopen as soon as next week. Training could also be brought forward a phase to the end of June. However, the Examiner claims this morning a return to group training for intercounty sides is unlikely until September at the earliest. Some racing today. Newmarket hosts the first Group 1 of the British Flat season this afternoon. Last year's Derby winner Anthony Van Dyke is trainer Aidan O'Brien's main hope of a 9th win in the Coronation Cup. That one is off at 4:25 this afternoon. There's also a 9-race programme at Lingfield. Snooker action as well today, lads. Gerard Green missing out on a place in the winner stage of the Championship League last night. He finished 2nd in Group 14 following defeat to Group winner Gary Wilson and a draw with Mitchell Mann. The Rocket is back in action today. Ronnie O'Sullivan, he's the overwhelming favourite in Group 10. He faces matches with Chris Wakelin, Michael Joju and Kishan Hirani.
Good stuff, Shane. Thanks for that. It is 13 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. Let us tell you what is coming up over the next little while on OTB AM. So, sports pages coming your way in just a sec. Then we've got Alan Quinlan chatting to us about the potential of summer rugby at around 20 to 9. Then at 9 o'clock, we've got that conversation with Aaron Cunningham, the former Crossmaglen Rangers footballer who's been in New York, who's been part of the protest. He'll be joining us at 9, and then at 15:15, we'll have the Mt Rushmore of Laois. Cliona Foley and Shane Keegan will be our 2 selectors. Time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Let's start with OTBsports.com. We'll see, Graham. That's a quote from John Giles, who's recounted 2 fiery battles with Graham Souness. If you thought Graham Souness was a hard man, surprise, surprise, John Giles was possibly even harder. A couple of other stories on the homepage there. John Giles naming his all-time Scotland 11. That was the hook for their piece last night. We've got that Paul McGinley article there as well, as Shane mentioned, questioning the impact of McIlroy's outspokenness on his golf. There's also news there of the NBA's return 22-team season to resume in Disneyland next month, basically. And my career is over, and this is the pinnacle of Irish rugby for the last 61 years. This is Andy Dunn and some more of his brilliant chat with Joe Malloy from Wednesday Night Rugby.
Actual Sport is back on the back pages for the first time since I've been on AM on for quite some time, and that's fantastic news. The Irish Independent, it's largely to do with the return of the Premier League, possible return of the GAA, and the Chelsea signing of Timo Werner are really the things that dominate across the back pages here. But Matt Law is a story in the Irish Indo. Chelsea swoop for Werner after Liverpool stall on release clause is the story here. He'd been long time linked with Liverpool, big fan of Klopp apparently. Probably didn't go there a little bit sooner on the basis of his playing opportunities. Been a bit stunted. You could say that maybe that remains the case, but it seemed like Chelsea might be about to offload a couple of players, and that on the basis of that he's going to make his way to Chelsea. That Willian and Pedro perhaps leaving Chelsea on. This is quite a significant swoop.
Have Liverpool missed the boat here in a quite significant way? Like, according to Matt Law's piece, the club have stalled on meeting his release clause, which is reported to be worth £53 million. It's the activation of this that has essentially got Werner into Chelsea's possession. It looks like a matter of formality now that he will become a Chelsea player come this summer window, and it's going to be quite a window for them. They've already got Hakim Ziyech lined up to join the club as well. If we're thinking that coronavirus is going to dip spending in football, Chelsea are not going to play by those rules. We've seen Arsenal and Spurs suggest that they're going to look at loans and free transfers. Elsewhere in London, not the case, where they're spending a huge amount of money. But I do think it's going to impact the likes of Liverpool potentially as well, who looked at 53 million quid, also looked at the fact that he's now going to get 200k a week. And they said to themselves, we can't afford this, despite the fact that Werner, as you said, would love to play under Jurgen Klopp. I just wonder if they've dropped the ball here a small bit, and perhaps that's a little bit harsh as well, given that everybody's in a precarious enough financial position.
Look, maybe that has something to do, but as we sit here, you say, well, what would they do with him almost? But I mean, it only takes a couple of games in that, you know, if Salah or Sané or somebody ends up getting, Mane ends up getting injured, and before you know it, it's like, oh crap, Liverpool have really missed the boat here. So who knows what's at play in the background, because frequently it is stuff, like it is that stuff that relationship existed, or that will for him to play there existed. So we'll see. There's plenty more on that elsewhere as well. Keane Tracy, inside as well, by the way, the last word from me on the Indo, has an interview inside with the former Ireland international Dan Toohey, retired some months back. I was pretty disillusioned with the whole game, did a piece with Off the Ball at that time, and the day you retire you become a nobody, which seems, I mean, more than mildly predicated on the idea that you were somebody to begin with. I don't mean that in relation to Dan Toohey. I mean generally, it seems I mean, I don't know, is that just me? We're told repeatedly by rugby players and professional sports people in the modern day that they, you know, oh look, we're not somebody special, it's another game, keep the head down. But now Dan Toohey lifts the lid on to tell us that actually professional sports people believe they are actually a cut above the rest.
Yeah, he's done some incredible interviews since his retirement, Dan Toohey.
Yes.
His book is going to be good, to say the least, if he hasn't already blown all the good content. The Irish Examiner leads with John Fogarty's piece on return to play in Gaelic games. GAA to order inter-county teams not to train together until September. So we had a couple of reports coming in yesterday morning about this, but there has been a bit more of an official word from Croke Park over the last 24 hours or so. So inter-county teams will be told by the GAA that they cannot officially return to collective training until September. So that paves the way for them to meet John Horan's target of an October return to action for inter-county teams. So the details of this plan, they won't be released until the government confirmed today that phase 2 of its own roadmap will go ahead on Monday. I think most people would be surprised if that wasn't the case. We could even have a situation where certain parts of phase 3 get slotted in to phase 2. So not only is it expected, to quote from John Fogarty this morning, that pitches will, and with walkways, will reopen pending application next week. The GAA are set to allow training to resume on June 28, the start of the government's phase 3, instead of July 20. So that is a big leap forward. Club action is set to return in mid to late July, and John Fogarty has spoken to Micheál Bryody of the CPA about this, and he's voiced a couple of concerns, particularly due to the fact that I guess we've had evidence in the club month of April in previous years that inter-county teams would grab the club players and have them involved with the inter-county setup for a part of April, just so that they're ready to go for May. And he says running off county championships without county players training with their clubs would be the ultimate kick in the face to clubs after all they have done for the people of Ireland during the COVID-19 crisis. So that has to be a concern. But the question to Bryody really is, what is the alternative? Do you put the inter-county season before the club season? And I'm not sure if he would go for that either. One interesting line here from Fogarty: it is envisaged crowds will be able to attend championship games in the autumn. So that is the expectation from the GAA, that they hope to get this inter-county season played off. And that is probably why John Horan was saying we need to put the club game first, because that gives the inter-county game the best chance of having a few spectators involved. It would be shocking if you could have a full stadium come the end of the year, quite frankly, but we might have socially distanced crowds at games. It would be very interesting for an All-Ireland final, Adrian. How do you pick the 20,000 people who get into Croke Park if that is the ratio of people that get allowed in?
Even that seems like a monster number at this stage. But maybe a ground like Croke Park can afford to handle that, particularly because it's largely open air, obviously, as well. Yeah, it'll be interesting. The timeline, Owen, so we have it right, because there are other reports out there as well. The timeline seems to be that it'll be club championship in the shorter term, and then a return to inter-county collective training by coming towards the end of September, or certainly September at some point, with a view to games in October. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's look, that's interesting. It definitely felt, and I know there was obviously some speculation about this yesterday. It felt like even though it was just a tiny step, the attempt to try and reopen the walkways around the grounds was definitely the first step on the path to some sort of return to play. My view over the last week would have been that we're obviously working through these phases now. The coronavirus is very much, it appears at this juncture, it may change at any point, but under control in a way that we'd all been kind of working towards. In that context, if everything else is beginning to reopen, right, to some degree, like, you know, the stories in the front pages this morning about a lot of the department stores and high street shops are going to reopen with a few exceptions, but that's the way we're headed, right? And there'll be queues outside, and there'll be social distancing, and there'll be appointments, and there'll be all of that sort of stuff. But to a large degree, a lot of the shops and a lot of Ireland is reopening. So almost the GA at that point is going to stand out like a sore thumb if it doesn't return. So I'd say that timeline seems fairly consistent. Like, if there's some blip in terms of coronavirus itself, in terms of like a second wave or whatever, we'll obviously all go back into our box and all of this stuff will be shelved again. But I mean, it wasn't my sense initially, I have to say. I know I mentioned it here as well, that I thought that the inter-county scene was always more likely to come back before the club scene, just because it's so unregulated. But this is the way they're going about it. They feel this is what makes most sense. There's going to be some official briefing, it seems, from up to now. It's been all sort of whispers, but some official briefing from Croke Park later today.
Yes, exactly. And then more as the next couple of days unfold as well, into next week, when we actually get to see what the GAA's COVID committee have actually come up with and what their return to play idea is, just to kind of rubber stamp it. But I think we've got a fairly good idea of what it's supposed to be, and there may not have been a huge amount of communication from the GAA over the last few weeks, but they've clearly been putting this plan together, and it looks like it's on course. And just to go back to the point, why would you put the inter-county game after the club game? I just think that there is a genuine belief within the GAA that they might be able to make some money this year, which is obviously going to come through the inter-county game, and that is why you want to put that last and second, put it after the club game in terms of a return to play.
Yeah, look, that in itself I think is an interesting question. Why do you want to have games back? Because it doesn't exist in the same space as the League of Ireland or the Premier League or professional rugby in this country, in that there aren't the same number of, there's not the same volume of jobs that are relying on it, I suppose.
Yeah, and it is interesting as well that, given the fact that they envisage crowds to be able to attend championship games in the autumn, what does that mean for the League of Ireland, for example? Like, that is a huge piece of news, that a sporting organisation in this country will be expected to have some crowds at their games. We can see how the League of Ireland just is looking at a very grim situation without getting supporters back into stadiums soon.
Do we have any sense on, maybe we don't, of in terms of the volumes of crowds that they can expect even outside of Croke Park? Like that, you know, there are a lot of grounds, even county grounds around the country that might not be the most modern setups in terms of facilitating whatever it is that's in place. Is there any sense from, like, as to how staggered the volume of fans will be?
I don't know, is the answer. I presume they would have to compile a list of grounds that would be suitable to do so. Park and Queeve would be the other one outside of Croke Park that would certainly spring to mind. The Semple Stadium potentially as well, just given the largeness of the stadium, if nothing else. Like with Croke Park, is it a situation where it might be easier to even close the hill and use 3 stands because you can clearly assign seating? Maybe we're at a stage in society already where we will be respecting the safe distance between people when they're standing in the hill as well. I would think that perhaps society will reach that point, but at the same time, maybe Croke Park will be one of the only safe places to have games with crowds before the end of the season. And like we should state this again, it's a percentage of a crowd, and John Fogarty is not saying that this is a guarantee, it's just envisaged, and it could be a potential thing that they have this year.
I don't know about depending on people, by the way. That's the one caveat, like any trip to the shop.
I'm too trusting a human being.
I've always said that about John, to be fair. So, right, well, look, there is a few more lines about that particular story in some of the other newspapers. The London Times is not one of them. The Ireland edition is very much focused on the Premier League. Chelsea win that race to land £53 million. Werner, writes Gary Jacob there. Martin Ziegler and Paul Joyce also writing about the story that Liverpool's possible title-winning game, this appears in a lot of the stories, is going to be against Everton on June the 21st. It's a 7 o'clock kickoff. It's going to be shown live on Sky Freeview, which is great news for people who don't have a subscription. And it's, as I said, it does appear in a lot of the back pages today. It's predicated, I think, on the basis that Man City would need to lose to Arsenal for that Liverpool-Everton game to be the one that clinches the title. It does seem that on that basis, it's sort of mildly ludicrous that a lot of the newspapers have that massive splash across the back page today, that it is like on the basis that your crowd are going to beat City.
Well, that's not going to happen. So it could be the one after. And after that, then it's Manchester City, isn't it, for City, Liverpool after Everton. So wouldn't be the worst consolation prize if they had to win the league against City rather than Everton. Back page of the Mirror is that exact story. Sunday Quest, 7 p.m, June 21st. Liverpool fans, put that date in your diaries. That's when you could end 30 years of hurt. Got a couple of other stories here from the world of football. Prem plan is a crowd pleaser. Premier League clubs believe there is a genuine chance of fans being allowed back into stadiums for the start of next season. In for the long haul, meanwhile, Shane Long has signed a new deal at Southampton, and Chelsea to hijack the Timo Werner deal, as we've already mentioned. There's also an exclusive interview here with Andy Cole, who's spoken a couple of times during the coronavirus lockdown, and fairly harrowing stuff. Considering what I've been through, if I make it to 50, I'll be made up. He says he'll be thankful to make it to 50 years of age after opening up about his ongoing health battle. Former United striker has been self-isolating during the coronavirus and has basically been revealing the huge mental and physical toll it has taken on him. He had a life-saving kidney transplant in 2017, and he says, I try not to look too far ahead and take it day by day.
Oh, it's incredible. The Irish Daily Star, I think, is my next port of call here. Date night, says Scott Coleman. It's an exclusive on, not to be seen in any of the back pages. They've got the inside track. Nobody else knew about this. The Star are themselves making the fixture list. June 21st, the date for Liverpool against Everton. Not much more needs to be said about that. But Kieran Cunningham also has that line that you mentioned earlier on in relation to GA, that clubs to be given the green light to return. Club Championship football and hurling to be back next month. It was speculated on yesterday, obviously, in inter-county teams. Collective training can't resume, it's said, until September, and games a month later. And minimum 10 weeks then to run off the Club Championship within counties. The straight knockout at championship level at inter-county is still the likeliest outcome, it says there as well, just to underline that. I can't wait for that. I mean, I know we've been starved of, and that's part of the context, and the new championship is way better than the old championship, but now that it's coming, likely, I cannot wait for a straight knockout championship. It's going to be absolutely epic. I mean, it could be so good on that we end up just scrapping out everything that went before. It's unlikely. I'd get back to it. But coming from a county like Westmeath, I know that our championship is done in a couple of weeks and get on with just enjoying the rest of it. But I mean, it must give you sweaty palms.
Live sport gives you sweaty palms at the moment, I think. Unless the Premier League comes along and ruins it for everybody.
I mean, in relation to Kerry and the possibility that, like, you know, there have been times where a straight knockout would not have been kind to your lot. In fact, you'd probably be without a couple of All-Irelands on the basis of it. Sometimes you need a bit of time to warm up, is what I'm saying.
True. I'm impartial, as you know, and of course it would be nice to see Kerry back up in the Hogan stand from a neutral standpoint.
Yeah, right.
The Irish Times, possible Everton-Liverpool title decider set for June 21st is their lead story here. Provisional list for first 3 full rounds given to clubs. Acceleration of return to play expected, meanwhile. This is Sean Moran on the GAA's return to play. Clubs set to reopen later this month, with competitions returning in August. And Johnny Waterston, meanwhile, here's hoping Irish hockey's greatest team don't miss out on Olympic dream, which is a fairly realistic possibility that some of those heading to Tokyo next year just need to be mindful of. That does this Olympic Games actually happen? It's one thing trying to organise a group of localised people to attend a Gaelic football match with a lot of distance between them in Croke Park this winter, but trying to get people from all around the world to descend on one city for a huge sporting event next summer, is that going to come too soon? And of course, if it does, that is going to be one of the heartbreaking stories about that amazing night in Donnybrook we've seen already in this campaign will just essentially mean nothing because the hockey competition won't happen. So that's the Irish Times this morning.
Could we make a rule that now that there's actually some sport coming back and some sport to talk about, that wild speculation about something we've absolutely no idea at this juncture whether it's going to happen or not is not something we're going to engage in? Can we bring that in as OTB AM legislation? In fairness, there has been official word from Japan this week that they are kind of concerned about what's going to happen next week. If it's not going to be called off completely, they're looking at a fairly scaled down Olympic Games. So it's not complete idle speculation. How can they call it off? How would they even dream about calling it off now? Why would they do that? Like, on the basis that the Globe gets on top of this thing soon. Well, OK, they're not going to call it off now, but I guess they have to be prepared to face a situation in February or March 2021 where globally they may not be in a comfortable enough position to run a full-scale Olympic Games. Like, I'd personally think it is a grim outlook to think that it's not going to happen at all. But I think because the idea has already been floated this week that you could have a scaled-back operation for the Olympics, once that seed is planted, I think that could become a reality next year. I don't know why you couldn't. I mean, he says, having just brought in legislation to say we can't talk about it. I don't know why you couldn't. The Olympics is like, why couldn't you just do it in 2022, for example? Like, you're getting into the next Olympic cycle at that point, are you not? But you're like, who cares? The cycle is gone. So, like, either don't do it or do it. Like, 2 years is plenty of time. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't see. It's a bit like the Ryder Cup. I just don't see the reason not to do it almost. Like, I can't really disagree with you on that in terms of pushing it back even another year, but it just kind of gets farcical at that point, doesn't it, pushing it back by a full 2 years. I guess it wouldn't have any World Cup to compete with that summer because it'll be a Winter World Cup and it'll be a fairly fresh slate for them to kind of dominate the headlines. Listen, a bit like the Star exclusive one, you heard it here first. The Telegraph, meanwhile, this morning have that Bremner to Chelsea line. They've also got the RFU considering switch to summer rugby from Gavin Mayers there. We'll get Alan Quinlan's thoughts about that in just a little bit. It's effectively part of trying to have a joined up global calendar, so an interesting proposition there. Premier League relegation is an interesting line here. Clubs are going to wait. Premier League clubs are going to wait to see if the championship can be finished before they decide if, before they even take a hard stance, one way or the other, on whether there will be Premier League relegation. So there was a threat by the Premier League to oppose promotion from the championship if they couldn't finish their season. But effectively, what they're doing is we're going to wait and see, is what they're saying. If the championship can get it finished, then there's a case, obviously, for the teams that are finished towards the top end of that to legitimately and maybe even follow a legal path to insist on their promotion. And then at that point, you have to have the relegation. So we'll see. But they are operating a wait and see. It was a Chelsea suggestion as well, meaning that teams can now have 9 players on the subs bench and they can use 5 subs is part of the new COVID setup. And English Test cricket on, I know you're buzzing about this, it's back on the Beeb. Nice one. Looking forward to that. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail, Werner U-turn. Chelsea set to nab £53 million hotshot as Reds go cold. Late night Liverpool title party on cards is their headline with regards to Liverpool potentially winning the Premier League against Everton. And Philip Quinn's got an interesting story here.
call on government to review FAI rescue deal. This has been one of the stories that have done the rounds for the entire week about the memorandum of understanding that exists between the government and the FAI about the bailout and all the different changes that will be need to be made at the top of the FAI. And he's spoken to Fianna Fáil TD Mark McSharry, and he fears the simmering unrest prompted by the demands of this memorandum signed on January 30th could destroy football if allowed to fester. And to quote McSharry, "It is my view that the next government should revisit the MOU between the government and the FAI regarding this, and the increase on the FAI's board independent directors being increased from 4 to 6. The FIFA and UEFA statutes declare that a majority has to come from football." And then he also talks about calling FAI council members with more than 10 years of service. He calls that a betrayal of people who've given a lifetime of voluntary effort to grassroots football. So strong stuff from Mark McSharry this morning.
The Guardian, meanwhile, Reds could make it a Super Sunday with the title at Goodison Park, writes David Heitner and Jacob Steinberg here. A week ago, we were reading reports that this might all be unlikely given the temptation of fans to attend in some capacity, particularly when it's so close to home, as in Liverpool fans at Goodison Park. But they say now today that it is June 21st, as we've been mentioning, 7 o'clock kickoff, Freeview on Sky, and we shall see all that pans out. Also in the Guardian elsewhere, Robert Kitson is the story that England's top players could be set for a wage cut as everybody grapples with the idea of decreased revenues here, and tease inside as well to an interview with, I say a tease, Joshua Kimmich inside. It's strange to win and not celebrate with your fans, so I'm just hoping that the interview inside is a bit more interesting than that.
The front page of the Racing Post is ITV Heaven, live racing for all on ITV4. And the small line on top there, Superstayer Stradivarius takes on Derby winner in Coronation Cup at Newmarket. A huge weekend of racing. And the back page of the Racing Post, French Connection can fire Foles to victory. That's a preview of Freiburg against Borussia Mönchengladbach tonight at 7:30.
The Irish Sun, Levy plea over fans as Spurs borrow £175 million. While Chelsea get Werner is the backstory here. Levy, the Spurs owner, obviously wants the UK government to allow fans back into the grounds, and he's saying that Spurs could be in line for losses of over £200 million.
The Irish News is next up from me. Study shows COVID infection more likely at training than in matches. This is the Stat Sports white paper that we mentioned on the show yesterday morning, which does indeed suggest that you're more likely to encroach on a player's 2-metre perimeter in training than you are in a match when it comes to Gaelic football. And Edouard, frustrated at falling short of 30, the French striker can't wait to celebrate Celtic's deserved title success. He was on 23 goals in 27 Scottish Premiership matches to help his side to a 13-point lead, and he was hoping to reach 30.
The Herald this morning has that news of Shane Long signing a contract extension at Southampton, and pointing out that some of his other Irish teammates maybe not so lucky and have an anxious wait to see if they can get their terms extended. Also that news about Timo Werner making the move to Chelsea, it looks as though, and also a story from Dan McDonnell and Aidan Fitzmaurice here that FAI hope to deliver League of Ireland clarity next week. Hopeful that clarity on the protracted debate around the proposed return of the League of Ireland can be delivered late next week is the story there.
Finally, let's have another look at what's on OTB Sports, and we're going to look at this through the prism of our brand new OTB Sports app this morning. So here's the personalised home feed with all of your latest sports news. So you can click on the radio tab to listen live to us this morning, or whatever's live on OTB Sports Radio, and you'll be able to listen to OTB Sports Radio all day long. So that's the radio tab, and then there's our video tab with all the latest from Off the Ball, and then our podcast, of course, as well, where you can subscribe to whatever series you want from OTB, and we are publishing over 40 podcasts per week at the moment. So you can get all of that and much more on the OTB Sports app. Just head to your App Store or the Google Play Store, and you can search for OTB Sports and download. It looks slick, Adrian. Yeah,
it looks very good, Owen. You're going to get a full endorsement of you won't get any objections to that here. No, it's good. There's lots of it's essentially whatever you want on. There's no messing around is the short story with the app. You can get on there. If you jump on at the minute, you'll be prompted to watch the live video of this show, which, I mean, is the most awesome way to kick off your Friday morning. But it's easy to navigate. The video is great. It's audio, it's video, it's the written word on. What more do you need? There's lots of exclusives up there as well. I think we've got the exclusive about the Liverpool Everton game on June 21st.
Right, today at 12 o'clock we're going to be launching Know Your Football, where you'll have the chance to win €1,000 by taking on Team OTB's football experts. So keep an eye on our social channels from 11 o'clock this morning to find out how to enter. Know Your Football will be brought to you with thanks with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. So John Egan joined Nathan on last night's football show, and here he is talking about football's return.
Are your sessions more or less back to where they were pre all this?
Yeah, they're similar now. It obviously took a while to build up, but one of the differences is like when the whistle blows and you're kind of near people, you just have to try and spread out a bit, which is quite weird. And you know, you've kind of people from the Premier League watching as well to make sure that it's, you know, everything is kind of done properly. But you know, the way we are as a group, you know, we train hard, and you know, we're training like normal when the whistle does go and you are playing. You know, there's no holding back, and that's just the way we are. Really, it comes from the manager, and you know, it comes from all the players that you know, you have to train how you play. And it's been a breath of fresh air really to get back to contact training, because it's been 2 or 3 months since we've had anything like that. So it's been brilliant.
And when we do get back into it, and there's every chance I think that you're going to be playing in the first game back, it looks as though it's going to be Sheffield United against Aston Villa. I think it's 6 o'clock kickoff on June 17th, ahead of that Arsenal-Manchester City game. Like, in one way, it'll be great to have some sort of a scandal around the Premier League or something to just distract us once again, that there's always some sort of a storyline. But there is going to be a huge focus on you and behaving in the right way, and whether it's, I don't know if you generally spit a lot on the pitch, but players spitting, things that were once acceptable, even corner kicks and the pushing and shoving that goes on at corner kicks. Like, for corner kick, are you going to be approaching that just as you would have previously? That, listen, if you want to have a slight tug of a player's jersey, you do that? Or do you need to, like, do you approach the opposition in any way different because of all this?
No, I think it's just going to be the same. Well, from my point of view, it'll be the same anyway. I don't think you can change the way you play. You know, you play the game the way you've always played it, and you know, you're not going to just. I'm not just going to stand back and let someone bend one in the top corner just because, you know, I don't want to get close to them. I think people will just play the way they play. I think in Germany now, you know, you even see celebrating. They're all celebrating together now and again. And the thing is, everyone's been tested. Your team has been tested, and the opposition are being tested. So it should be safe. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but from my point of view and from our point of view, we'll be treating it as normal games and, you know, business as usual. And yeah, I don't think I'll be, well, I'll try not to step off too many people and give them yards, but yeah, I'll try my best to keep it tight at the back.
John Egan speaking to Nathan on last night's football show. Full piece available in the podcast streams or on youtube.com/off the ball. Right, we are turning our attention to rugby. Alan Quinlan, a very good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Not too bad at all. Let's get straight into it. On the front of the Daily Telegraph sports section this morning, Bill Sweeney of the RFU has been speaking about the possibility of summer rugby. So just the 3 quick points from this. Six Nations is going to be aligned with Southern Hemisphere Rugby Championship, which we already knew. Then there will be 30 weekends for club rugby from January to August in 2 blocks, obviously either side of the Six Nations. And then the summer tours, including the Lions, will move to October. What are your thoughts on all of this?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Owen, to be honest. I think it's, you know, moving away from the traditional kind of winter rugby in the Northern Hemisphere is something that would take a bit of getting used to. The pros and cons, I suppose the pros would be if you move to summer rugby, you know, better underfoot conditions, more attractive rugby, no drab, rainy kind of, there's always a chance you'll get them anyway, even in spring. And so I think the calendar needs to be aligned better. There's no doubt about it. That will improve the game and make it, you know, an even playing field more. But I just don't know, because there's a lot of speculation, I think, and there's a lot of talk about different sorts of change in the game, and certainly moving the Six Nations from February, March to March, April. That would probably improve your chances of getting better weather, and the Rugby Championship moving the other way a little bit to try and keep them on around the same time, which, you know, I've said this a few times to you know, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia coming up here in November is at the end of their season. It's kind of at the start of the international season for the Northern Hemisphere teams. So, in an ideal world, you try and align them and have them both kind of finishing around the same time, which probably makes sense. So certainly needs to be some change because so sometimes change is good, but I'm not really sure, how it will all work at this stage.
Would summer rugby not be fantastic, Alan, because you'll have a better product? I know you'll say we'll get rainy days in Ireland anyway, but also as well, you're not going up against the Premier League for the vast majority of your club season.
Yeah, but if you play summer rugby, you're kind of potentially clashing it with a World Cup every couple of years, European Championships, Olympics, all that kind of stuff. And in Ireland here, the GA. So, again, these are things that you can't cover every base. I think if you move away from tradition that's been there for so long, I think you will get some resistance to it. The big pro to this, Owen, is the better conditions, and the ability to go out and watch a game in a T-shirt, and for the players to be on dry ground, really, and firm ground, and you would probably get more attractive rugby. So there's that would be the big improvement. But I think any sort of change in sport takes time to get used to. And if they did run a season from, say January up to the end of October, it would possibly work and align the seasons. The big factor in all this will be the clubs, money, finances, sponsorship, and then ultimately the players. If you were a player finishing in October and being told that's your pre-season now, well, off you go and enjoy your summer break or your break from rugby. I suppose you could still fly off to the Southern Hemisphere for your holidays and stuff like that, but there's a lot of people, a lot of change around that. But ultimately, if it's better for the game, and I know this will be teased out in the next while, there is ongoing talks, and it's worth some sort of change, definitely. Maybe not drastically changing the whole season completely, but trying to realign things a little bit better would definitely probably needs to happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if they left some elite level sport in for the bleak midwinter months and not remove it all from us entirely. One other line we wanted to get your thoughts on, Quinny. It's exclusive by Derek Foley in the Irish Daily Star this morning that Joe Schmidt is being tapped up by Gloucester. He was on with us last week, and it definitely felt like he was of a view that he'd been looking at a lot of rugby, speaking to a lot of people, and maybe he's of a mind to get back. There's two roles there, director of rugby and head coach, that are vacant now after David Humphreys and Johan Ackerman are gone. But Schmidt, Richard Cockerell, Rob Howley, who's back in the game, an interesting piece with him in the Mail during the week about the gambling issue that he had and how that all came. It's a fascinating backstory as well, worth a read. Di Young, Michael Cheika and Stuart Lancaster, another one, all being linked with Gloucester.
Yeah, it's no surprise, really. I think Joe Schmidt will be linked with any job that comes up in World Rugby at the moment. And it was interesting because I was listening to Andy Good speaking about Johan Ackerman's departure a couple of weeks ago from Gloucester, and how he'd signed a new contract last year, and suddenly he's gone and he's going to Japan. So all is not well in Gloucester, I don't think. And it seems like it was a nice parting of ways with David Humphreys as well, but I don't think that is the case. I think it hasn't ended well there, in my opinion, and Andy Good is right in what he was saying as well. We always hear about these departures. Everyone shook hands and everyone's happy to move on, but so I don't know what.
It's such a weird time for somebody to any coach
strange.
or manager that leaves now. It seems weird.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a little bit like what Dan Toohey said on the Indo this morning, where he's speaking about everyone being PC and nobody saying anything, nobody speaking out. It just doesn't seem right for me that David Humphreys will just suddenly decide, well, it's the right time to go and move on and let somebody else take over the reins. And we've done X, Y, and Z in Gloucester, and we've set up a good foundation here and platform. It's not all. I can't believe it's all perfect there, but look, he's gone. Ackerman is gone.
You'd hate to see Stuart Lancaster lost from the Irish game, Quinny.
What do you mean by that now, Adrian? That if he went, are you suggesting that I'd be happy if he went and Leinster lost out lost ground a little bit on the.
Listen, if that's your interpretation of it, roll with it.
But I'm not sure. You'd have to clarify that. But look, I'm sure Stuart. Again, he's like Joe Schmidt. These guys are highly sought rugby coaches, and they've international experience as well. When you go to a club game and you see the impact that Stuart Lancaster has made in Leinster, when you're in that level above and coaching international players, and you're back down with the everyday coaching of club players, and that's where Joe excelled and excelled with Claremont, with Leinster, and that's why he would be of interest to any club. And so that's not a surprise really. It's really down to whether he throws his hat in the ring and takes a job in the club game. He has said, not just with us last Friday, but that he does want to get back into the game and coaching. So whether that's at international or club level, who knows? Would he still base himself in Ireland? Would he commute over and back and do what Stuart Lancaster is doing here? That's a possibility as well to do that. So it's something that may interest him.
Is there? Can I just one last one from this on me? Is there any possibility that, because there was obviously all that speculation towards the end of his time with Ireland that he was he going to go back to New Zealand and all that, and he's obviously made the decision now that Ireland is the place for him, regardless of the work scenario, as you say, he may commute. Is there any possibility that Joe Schmidt gets back involved in the Irish game at some level soon?
Well, I don't think in the next little while. I think if he takes another job somewhere in France or the UK or stays in the Northern Hemisphere, I think there's no reason why he may not come back and coach Ireland again or coach one of the provinces again. I'm sure if there was an opening or an opportunity in one of the provinces, they'd be very keen to have him. I think his relationship with the RFU has been very good, and I think he's proven quality. He's someone who brings trophies to whatever team he goes to. So there's absolutely no doubt that he could be back involved coaching one of the provinces or Ireland again in the future, for sure.
Like, it's slightly ludicrous saying, but like, I mean, if you look at a province like Connacht, for example, like somebody with his mind almost in a director of rugby role would be an unbelievable lift for them.
Well, I think with his experience and, as I said, with his ability to win trophies, I think any club would be delighted to have him. But again, this is going to be down to Joe. I think he will have the luxury of being able to pick and choose. He's not like some rugby coaches who are desperate to get back into work and applying for every job that goes there, which is it's a tough market. You end up losing your job somewhere, and it's harder to get another job. We know how ruthless it is here in Ireland. If you don't do well and you lose your job and you're under pressure, you're kind of written off a little bit. And so, of course, yeah, if he did go to Connacht, but again, these are IRFU decisions, and that would be a big step. And Andy Friend is already there, and I think he's doing a fantastic job with Connacht and what he's doing.
Yeah. Alan, one last thing we wanted to chat about was our classic game club this week, which is Shane Horgan's try. It's Croke Park, 2007, Ireland against England. An incredible game, an incredible try. What a performance by Ireland. Where were you during this? Where were you for the game, and what was the build-up like from your perspective?
I was sitting in the stand. I was on the extended squad, so I trained with the group throughout that Six Nations, and unfortunately I couldn't get into the team. A lot of good players there, and I think I just think it was a special time for anyone. I was very envious that I wasn't out in the field, but very proud to be Irish that day, particularly given the history and of everything that happened and the whole build-up. I think it was just a really. I was very proud of the fact that the Irish fans that day showed a lot of respect to England, and we didn't let ourselves down by booing and jeering and stuff like that. And when they played their anthem and stuff like that. So I think it was, and that kind of added to the sense, that kind of spooked the English players. I remember speaking to some of them afterward, and some of them spoke in the media that they expected that bit of hatred and they were going to try and use that to give them a little bit of an edge, like that they were backed into a corner. And really when their anthem came on and there was silence and it was respected, I think they were a bit shocked themselves. So it was a very special day. I think it was an incredible build up to the game. and an incredible performance as well. So I think it's one that people will look back on in many, many years to come, and it's etched up in history there as been a very special day for not just for Irish rugby, but for Irish sport and for Irish people as a society. That just the history and associated with the whole thing, and the way the GAA opened up the grounds and stuff like that. So it was special for the players and special for the whole group to be involved. And as I said, what a performance.
Were you close to getting in, Quinny? Were you close to being in the squad, or what was the conversation like? Eddie Sullivan, like
my usual story, about two steps away, Adrian. I think I trained with the squad and warmed up with them, and got back into the suit and took my seat in the stand. So I was, a couple of unfortunately, I just couldn't get into the back row, and they were playing really well, and that was just a selection situation at the time, and I was coming back from my knee as well, so I think I was certainly behind the other players that year as regards fitness and performance and consistency and all that kind of stuff. So, but it was a brilliant team. There was some great leaders in that team, fantastic players who went on to. The vast majority went on to win a Grand Slam a couple of years later. But I just don't think that any team would have beaten Ireland that day, given what was at stake and what was on the line, really. And it was a very emotional day. You saw the emotion. John Hayes, who never really showed any emotion, he's crying in the anthem and stuff like that. So it was nice to be part of the training group that throughout that whole thing. But again, unfortunately, I was envious. I wasn't out in the field, but very proud of the players. I think they were absolutely amazing, the performance they put in.
Yeah, for sure. Alan Quinlan, thanks a million for hopping on this morning.
Cheers, lads.
Alan Quinlan there on the line. He's with us every Friday morning here on OTB AM. Right, just to tell you that the Great Community Challenge is an online game show fundraiser which launched last week to enable sports clubs, charities and community organisations to deliver their fundraising virtually. By following the fundraising model, each organisation will be guaranteed fundraising of €5,000. The Great Community Challenge sees local club members and groups come together virtually to compete in a game show and raise money for their chosen organisation, and each organisation will be with a chance of winning €50,000. For more information and details on how to enter and play, visit thegreatcommunitychallenge.ie. Right, earlier this morning we caught up with former Crossmaglen Rangers footballer Aaron Cunningham, who is now living in New York City and has been taking part in the protests over there over the past week. Now, Aaron has suffered racist abuse back here in Ireland and spoke to us about what it's like right now in the United States. OK, delighted to say that we are joined on the line by former Crossmaglen Rangers footballer Aaron Cunningham. Aaron, how are things? Good evening to you, I dare say. It is 6:30 in the morning here, so what time is it there? Just gone 1:30, I presume?
Yeah, just after 1:30 AM. Yeah, so that's not too bad. I'm awake anyway, so it's good.
The first question is, how are things? Like, what an unbelievably scary and crazy 10-12 weeks it's been in New York City for a multitude of reasons. How has it been for you?
It's been very strange and quite surreal, you know. I think when the COVID crisis hit, nobody expected it to shut down really as it has done. It took everybody, I think, by surprise just how quickly things got shut down. Yeah, so it's definitely a strange time, and then you have the backdrop of everything else that's going on right now too. Just adds to it, you know.
So could you explain to us your last 7 or 8 days or so after the video of George Floyd circulates and you start to realise that there is going to be a huge movement of people all around the States?
Yeah, so whenever the video came out, and I actually think the backdrop of COVID had a lot to do in this movement. Not only were people, you know, in front of the TV screens actually seeing and witnessing somebody die, they could not ignore it. They could not maybe be caught up in what would be considered their normal day-to-day life, maybe too busy to look at it, too busy to see the video. People seen it, and you're obviously seeing how people are reacting. It's something that's gone on for a long time. And, you know, the momentum has just snowballed in a really, really great, powerful way. I remember initially when it broke, watching the video and taking probably a few days to come to terms with what I'd actually just seen. And people started getting more and more outraged by it. It grew, and you're now seeing a lot of people basically saying that it's not good enough and that there should be no place for that in society. And, you know, it's a powerful thing that's happening right now.
Could you describe the protest that you were initially involved in and how that's grown over the last couple of weeks, and perhaps what you've seen as well, because we're still getting stories even overnight about police in New York City and how the mayor has reacted to some fairly OTT showings of force from the police force, from the NYPD over there at the moment. So could you explain to us what you've seen and how you've been involved in the protest?
Yeah, so I was very careful to make sure that I picked a protest that was organised by somebody responsible, because there's a lot of things going on right now, and you want to make sure that, you know, you do your homework and your research into what's going on, so you know exactly where you're going to be and what it's going to be about. So I had seen a protest that was organised for Times Square. I think it was a couple of days ago. Must be Monday or Tuesday, I think. And yeah, I just picked it. It seemed like a good one to go to. It seemed to be well organised. When I got there at 3 o'clock, there were maybe a couple of thousand people there, which was big in numbers, but not in terms of New York. You know, you were still looking around Times Square and it looked quite empty and vast. But by the time, I'd say maybe 4 o'clock, 4:30 came, the place was full. And we continued then to march around New York, downtown, ended up in Washington Square Park, where the final stages of that protest occurred. But it was a very powerful thing, walking through the streets of New York, meeting people beeping their car horns at you, cheering out the windows from their apartments, people joining the march along the way. I think by the end there was tens of thousands of people in Washington Square Park, and it actually, at the time, I remember watching the protests on TV and wanting to actually take part, because I didn't really want to sit back and feel that because I'm I'm a big advocate of this subject and I'm passionate about it, I couldn't really sit back and not do anything. So when I actually got down there, it actually filled you with hope a little bit. You know, people are outraged and people don't want to see it. And the surprising thing for me is that it wasn't just black people or people in minorities. A lot of white people are out there too, sort of my age, 30 to 40 and even younger. So it's that generation that's going to make a change here, I think.
From your perspective, how has the behaviour of the NYPD been over the last week or so?
That's a very sort of there's two sides to it. They have been very forceful, in particular in a couple of videos that I've seen. You see people basically getting abused, getting assaulted, and getting away with it. And that's basically what this protest is about as well. You know, it's systemic racism, police brutality. And then on the flip side of that, where people are trying to protest peacefully, you have people with their own agendas out there doing riots and looting. Now, they are few and far between, but again, the police have to come down hard on that too. So there is a fine line, but there's no doubting that police brutality is something that does go on. It goes on a lot more than it should go on, and this is hopefully where it's going to come to an end.
Aaron, will you talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned the word hope there just a couple of moments ago, and I've actually just been, before we came on air here, just been watching that video. I don't know if you've seen it overnight, but a bunch of NFL players, black NFL players, have come out and said that they're tired of their franchises not coming out to speak about this thing. And from here, looking over there, there does feel to be, you've spoken about it as well, that maybe a little bit of momentum, that sense of global outrage almost by it. I am conscious that, like I read, I don't know if you saw the statement from Michael D. Higgins during the week where he was saying that he was a student in the US in, I think it might have been the 60s, and at that point there'd been a real feeling of an opportunity to do something about systemic racism there and to do something deep about it. in the context of that, obviously decades later, and we're still there, will you talk to us a little bit about that hope and where that's coming from and where you think it might go?
Yeah, I just feel that it's something that has been talked about and acted upon for years, you know. From Rosa Parks, wouldn't give up her seat on that bus, right through till now. And again, that was late 60s, and that's when that movement really started. And it's hard to think that we're still talking about it in 2020, you know, 50 years later. But it's here, and I think that it's a global thing. This feels different. Even speaking to people over here that have been involved in this movement for a long time now, even they say this one feels different. You know, you only have to turn on the screens and see the protests that are happening right throughout the world. Dublin, Belfast, Australia, Amsterdam. People are getting out and people aren't happy with it. So there does seem to be a real appetite for change.
Yeah.
I also think, though, that the hope sort of comes from seeing people my age, my generation and younger. They didn't grow up with this, you know. People in my generation especially have travelled all over the world, have friends from all different backgrounds and cultures. This racism is alien to us. We don't really understand it. We agree it shouldn't happen, and we're going to try and stamp it out. But I think this is the time. You know, I don't think it's going to go away as quickly as maybe other protests or other maybe movements or actions have faded. This is going to stay, and I think there is going to be real change. But again, it has to come from at a federal level as well. I think at a local level, things have to reform, be it socioeconomically or maybe a reform of police departments across the states. But I think reform has to happen locally. People have to get out and vote, and then the change can come at federal level. Now, it won't happen overnight, but, you know, you have to start somewhere, and I think this is happening right now.
We'd Jean Akpa-Moses, Owen and Ger were talking to Jean Akpa-Moses and Joseph Ojewumi during the week about their own lived experiences in Ireland, and it was very clear from listening to that wasn't always a smooth thing, that they had been very much, as young people, very much exposed to racism. What's your own lived experience, Aaron? You were obviously, there was a high-profile case back in 2012. People remember the back end of 2012 involving a Kilcoo player who was banned for 6 months, reduced to 4, and ultimately, as you said at the time yourself, it was nothing more than a bit of an extended holiday for him. But can you talk to us about your own lived experience of it, and you know, whether that was something you had to experience as a kid, whether the Kilcoo incident was a one-off, or what is your experience of it here?
Well, I suppose growing up, obviously my dad being half black, he would have told me a lot about his experiences, again, playing Gaelic football with Armagh and playing soccer with Portadown. He would have told me growing up about his experience with racism, the things that he received. You know, whether people were throwing bananas down at him while he was playing, or receiving verbal abuse from supporters. He told me about it, and it's something that I couldn't get my head around why. You know, he was my dad, and he basically said to me from a young age that, you know, he had taken enough of that abuse, that I didn't have to take it, and if something was to happen, that I should take a stand for it. And that's actually that's what happened. Circumstances sort of fell into play in that Ulster final, and you know, it was the sort of thing that, even though in the middle of the game I knew that, like, it was, I wouldn't say an opportunity, because that's the wrong word, but it was like something had to be done. And you know, that's coming 8 years now, which is crazy. It seems just like yesterday, but you know, I even at the time, and I still feel that the GAA missed the boat a little bit in terms of their reaction to it. You know, you're going to have to look in 5 years' time. You look down the list of players that are going to be playing inter-county football, and they're going to have surnames from Eastern Europe and Africa, all around the world. It's even played over here. You know, lucky enough to have represented New York over here in the Connacht Championship, and you know, that's a very big part of their ethos is you know, including everybody. Everybody's equal, because it's such a very diverse city that we live in, and we want everybody to play our game. So I suppose that was the only real incident in senior football that happened to me. Again, when I was a kid, I would have got a few names here and there, but I sort of put that, not excusing it, but you put that down to kids being kids and not really understanding exactly what they're saying. But it's different when you get it from a grown man who knows exactly what they're trying to do. So that's where I sort of drew the line on that one. I felt that it was appropriate to speak out.
Yeah, it's grim either way. The bans obviously that were dished out at the time, and just on the missed opportunity in relation to the GA specifically, Aaron, because they obviously play such an important role, and have obviously stood up to the plate over the last while. I don't know how much attention you've been paying to in relation to the COVID situation here, but they've very much stood up to the plate there to demonstrate, I suppose, how they can actually reach into properly into communities when the will is there. Like in relation to the bans, and regardless of the fact that it was a December to April thing and had no impact on them whatsoever, like a ban obviously might deal with a racist in that they'll be less likely maybe to say something again, but actually in any kind of a deep-rooted way has no impact whatsoever in changing the culture of racist behaviour. Have you any thoughts on that, I suppose, initially, or any ideas about how it would be if you were recommending the GEA to properly, deeply tackle this thing? What would be the best route?
It has to be education in schools. It has to, both coordinated with GEA clubs and in schools. There should be some sort of like a diversity, inclusivity program. Even maybe sensitivity is probably the wrong word, but I think going forward, we're going to have a lot of people, a lot of cultures, a lot of ethnicities playing our game, and we have to educate people on showing respect for all. And I think the only way to do that is doing it when they're young. There's no point doing it to somebody when they're 20, 25, 30, because they've already got beliefs instilled in them from what they were taught when they were young. So I believe that something needs to be done at a youth level. That's the way I would tackle it.
Yeah, because the conversations around these things can be very stilted. John Barnes is one of the most thoughtful speakers on this topic that I've heard. He was actually on with our own Joe Malloy a couple of weeks ago talking about it as well. But his theory is that most people are racist on some level, and actually acknowledging that, and you're obviously at that point sort of turns on the tap and your capacity to do something about it. Whereas I think most people in conversation, when the word racism or racist comes up, the rush to tell you that they're not almost precludes any capacity to make any forward momentum in terms of tackling it.
Yeah, that's a very, very true statement. But again, you also, those people, if that's the route that maybe, John Barnes was referring to, or people maybe admit it, but there has to be a will to change also, or a will even to listen. I've had I wouldn't say a tough few days, but I've had a few tough conversations with people who are my friends over here. White, Irish, American, Hispanic, Black. We just thrashed out different issues and different topics and had a real proper life discussion about how things are, where we should go. I haven't lost any friends or anything, but we just basically just cleared the air a little bit in terms of what we believe racism is, or what can be done about it, what should be done about it. And we haven't seen eye to eye all the time, but it's that willingness to engage in that conversation. There has to be a lane of communication. I've seen it. People aren't willing to engage in conversation. They don't want to listen to your opinion. They've got a one-track mind, and good luck to them.
There's a disparity in what people believe racism to be, right?
100%, yeah. There's especially in this country, there's like an undercurrent that people aren't even aware of. you know, and why things are the way they are. Maybe even like socioeconomically over here, the opportunities that people are afforded that people of privilege can't see. And then maybe they can see it and don't want to see it or don't want to acknowledge that they see it, you know? So there's a whole lot of different branches that it can come in without being outwardly racist. But yeah, there's a big issue, and it's not even just in America, but in terms of the world, even in terms of our own country, you see that undercurrent at times. But look, you have to start a dialogue somewhere, and at least be willing to have a conversation about it. I think that's the first part. You have to be willing to engage in a conversation that sometimes is tough, you know.
How does that undercurrent exist in Ireland?
I mean, we sort of seen it in the north a little bit, maybe a little bit before my time, you know, when the British were there, and the Catholics in the north were mistreated for years, and you know, Catholics in the north marched for a vote. You know, it does echo. I'm not saying it's the same thing or anything, but it echoes what a lot of people are going through right throughout the world, even in this country, you know.
Yeah, it's the power of conversation, Aaron, isn't it? I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that you said here over the last little while, that there is that on it, there's a very different thing between getting out and, like, I'd be conscious as well that marches have happened before, movements have happened before, campaigns have happened before, and yet we're in the same place decades later. But that honesty of conversation on a very local level is almost one of the keys here.
Yeah. At a local level, you have to have those conversations. Things have to reform at local level, before there's any improvement, because you can, especially in this country, you can federally, you can make all the changes that you want, but at a local level, it's still going to exist, you know. And things are very short here. You get a 4-year term, and it swings back from one party to the other, and you know, people haven't got enough time to set things up, and it sort of has to be a cross-party initiative. I feel that the guy in charge here right now is more divisive than good, clearly. You know, so the first thing is people are going to vote here and get him out in November, and start taking it from there, because he's showing absolutely zero leadership during this time, you know.
How concerned would you be, Aaron, that, I mean, Reagan was the last time a sitting president wasn't elected back in, and he's obviously giving voice to a lot of dangerous people out there and a lot of dangerous methodologies. How concerned would you be if this guy gets re-elected?
Very concerned. I would believe that it would be the end of that free America that we all have in our heads. He basically wants to run it like a dictatorship. He looks up to the guys in the Far East, North Korea, China, although with the coronavirus he's since slated China, but he sort of comes and goes when it suits him. Even Putin, he loves how he can control his people, and that's basically what he wants to do here. He wants to control people. He incites hatred, divisiveness. You know, he's doing nothing to bring unity to people during this time whatsoever. And I think, you know, his handling of the whole COVID crisis, I believe, sort of took a few points away from him in regards his re-election. But I think his handling of this situation and not openly condemning the cops in Minnesota for murdering George Floyd, I think that's really going to come back to bite him, because even within the Republican Party, you know, you watch the guy die on screen, and nothing has been said about it. So, you know, he's blasted peaceful protesters in front of the White House so that he can walk across and get a photo op in front of a church holding a Bible that he doesn't know what's in it. You know, he's playing to a certain demographic in the States, that middle America. Yeah, this is a big election. If he gets re-elected, this is going to be a very, very, very bad place to be. I don't think it's going to help what's happening whatsoever.
In our lifetime, it feels like we're in the midst of a real opportunity here. I'm very conscious of not sort of wanting to end the conversation of some sort of a falsehood around hope. But you have mentioned the word a couple of times, and don't feel the need that you need to be. I don't have words in your mouth over it, but it does feel we're in the midst of a generational opportunity here. How hopeful are you that something concrete can come of all this?
One, very hopeful. I see it firsthand. It's not going away. You know, although I've only been here maybe 3.5, 4 years, I've seen other news reports of people being killed, like George Floyd was killed. And this one feels different. You know, people do, whenever things happen like that, people do protest. You know, it usually happens somewhere in Middle America, and you'll see a protest or two for a few days, and it'll be in the news for a week, and you'll not hear anything about it. This isn't going away. This is gone global in a big way. You're not just getting one or two influencers or celebrities speaking about it. You're getting proper people speaking about it. LeBron James speaking about it. He said he's not going to let it go. He's arguably the greatest basketball player in the world. For that culture, he's an absolute legend. You have Steve Kerr, again, in that basketball culture, but a white man. Everybody's talking about it. It's the word on everybody's lips, you know. There is a real opportunity here. Even take a step back from the States and look at how it's affected the rest of the world. The protests that are happening, New Zealand, as I said, Australia, Amsterdam, even at home, something has to be done. And I think this is the time, and people realise that this is the time. I'm just hoping that they'll actually vote, because that's, you know, you can protest all you want, you can ask for changes, but if you're not willing to get out and use your vote, then, you know, you might as well not protest it to begin with. So, you know, people here have to follow it up and vote.
Just on a final point then, Aaron, from an Irish perspective, looking at what's happening in the United States, how important is it for us as a society here in Ireland to not just simply point the finger at the United States and say racism happens over there, as somebody who has experienced outright explicit racism in this very country? Just don't bury your head in the sand. Acknowledge that it's a thing, and deal with it. You know, it's a moral responsibility. It's a civil responsibility to speak up for those that are oppressed, or for those that have some sort of inequality. It's just don't have a conversation. Have a conversation. Be willing to have that conversation. Be willing to improve things. Just don't bury your head in the sand and take a lead. You know, I'm an Irish guy over here. Like I'm going to be very vocal about it on my social media, into my friends. You know, just keep talking about it. Keep talking about it until people can't ignore you. You know what I mean? If you stop talking, it's very easy for it to be brushed under the carpet. And I believe that this isn't going to be pushed under the carpet. You know, people are talking. People say they're going to keep talking about it. People are acting on it. I know it's still fresh and it's a week or two, but people are going to talk about it. And, you know, I really believe it's going to happen. Change is coming. It might take a couple of years to reform things, but change is coming here. Well, listen, Aaron, it's been great catching up this morning. Hopefully chat to you again soon, and thanks a million for taking the call. No worries at all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
You wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998. If you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just go, instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio.
Missing this?
I remember Ollie texted me Solskjaer. One or two people would get hold of my number, unfortunately, and he would text me.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
It is time for Laois's Mount Rushmore. It is the big one this morning, I would say, according to Cliona Foley and according to Shane Keegan. They're both on standby. We'll start with you, Cliona. This is a big moment for you. This is a big moment for your county as the OTB selector this morning. Are you feeling the pressure?
I'm feeling terrible pressure, the only time to ever represent my county, and God forgive me for what I may be about to do or bring down a pops.
So for anybody who's just joining our series for the first time, here is how it works. We have our OTB selector, who is Cliona. She is going to pick the 4 names that she feels belongs on Laois's sporting Mount Rushmore. Then Shane will come along and ruthlessly remove one of them from the mountain and put another one up. There's possibly even more pressure that comes with that, Shane. How are you feeling?
Yeah, definitely feeling the pressure on, no doubt about it. It's amazing. I threw it out on Twitter a night or two ago that myself and Cliona were going to be doing this, and I think I got 32 names back within the first hour or so. So there's definitely not a general consensus. I think the only thing guaranteed is that we're going to get this wrong.
Whatever's left of my reputation is about to be shattered.
So before we get into your first pick, Cliona, how have you thought about this? Has there been a list of criteria that you've gone through?
Yeah. I've looked and I've watched several of these over the weeks and been fascinated by them. But I think for me, if we are talking about Mount Rushmore, then there has to be certain things that a Mount Rushmore should capture. For me, sport is about more than one sport. I think that's really important, and I think Laois reflects that. I think you should capture something of the history, the important history of a county. If you're going to have a Mount Rushmore, I think it's got to have some historical significance. It has to be about excellence, but I think it has to be about the spirit of a county. And as Shane would say, we're humble people in Laois, but that doesn't mean we don't have lots of pride.
Well, let's do it. Let's get into the first pick, Cliona. Who have you gone for? Sorry, Adrian.
Before we do that, just like, because we've done, I think it's important at this stage, we've done, when we've had Meath on, we've got the stuff about, it's a GA county and it's a racing county. We had Wicklow on, they were GA and boxing, obviously. We'd Sligo on, they didn't know what the hell they were. What sort of a county is Laois in terms of sporting lineage?
Well, I grew up, as I say, we don't have the lineage of, the Kerry All-Irelands. We don't have all of that. But I grew up in a place called Abbeyleix near Portlaoise. And it was a town that had a very eclectic mix of sport in it. And Portlaoise was our biggest town. And it was a town that had rugby in it. It had basketball in it. It had GA in it, obviously. And also, I would always have regarded Laois as an athletics county as well. And it produced some really good athletes. And some athletes, like Monica Riley from my own town, who went to America on scholarship. So, it was that kind of it's a kind of a county, I think, that has a very eclectic mix. We're in the middle of the country, and I think because we're in the middle of the country, we were influenced by lots of other things as well.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think we are predominantly a GAA county. We might be a GAA county that have been somewhat starved of success. But yeah, we are definitely a GAA county. Look, we don't have your high profile golfers or really high profile, I suppose, rugby internationals or something like that some of the rest would have, I suppose, and certainly being given that my own sport to be soccer, we certainly haven't had too much success on that front. So I mean, when I was looking at it, I suppose I would have divided it into 4 lists. I would have had 6 hurlers, 6 footballers, 4 rugby players, and then 5 people who fell under the heading other. So fairly eclectic mix, yeah.
We may as well.
Yep.
We may as well get cracking on it. So, Cliona, your first pick, is this possibly the the one that was a no-brainer. I think possibly the most famous GAA figure to ever come out of the county.
Yes, and none of us speaking this morning ever saw him play. But and Shane's right. Like it is a big GAA county, obviously, Laois. But you can't look past Tommy Murphy. I think in all of the recent GAA success we've had in hurling and football, I don't think anybody can look past Tommy Murphy. So who's Tommy Murphy? Tommy Murphy, the Tommy Murphy Cup famously is called after him. The GAA named it in the late 90s. But he was known as the Boy Wonder, and there was a very good reason for that. Any man with a nickname like that deserved it, clearly. He played for Laois Minors at 15, but he played for the Laois Seniors when he was 16. He actually played in an All-Ireland semi-final, a replay against Kerry that they lost by a point when he was 16, which is sensational. So he was famous in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. And loads of people will go, well, why do you pick somebody from then? And, he made the team of the millennium in the GAA football, and he was the only one on that team who came from a county that didn't win an All-Ireland final. And his reputation was such that, he's in midfield with, guess who? Mick O'Connell. He's on a team in the millennium that included, everybody from Pat Spillane, Mikey Sheahan, Sean O'Neill, Enda Collar and Sean Flanagan, John Joe Riley. That's the quality of people he's in there beside. And he went back and he scored a point, I think, in that game against Kerry. But the following year he won a Schools All-Ireland with Knockbeg. So that will tell you the kind of player he was. He was absolutely, no wonder he was called the Boy Wonder.
Is there a question mark about Tommy Murphy in terms of, well, not a question mark, but how close to the border is he? How close to being a Carlow man is Tommy Murphy? Doing a little bit of research, even on current day Google Maps, it just shows how incredibly close the Gragecullen GAA club is to the Carlow border. It's literally metres away from the dotted line. So what we've actually got up on screen...
Oh, Eoin, you're not going to start this route.
I was just... because
you're getting into dangerous territory, Eoin.
Jane, step into this.
I remember doing a piece with Paul Rouse a couple of years ago on this, and how there had been a movement of the borders when it came to a couple of the GAA clubs, and thankfully his club was moved within the Laois border in the 20th century, or early in the 20th century, and therefore it's not up for debate, but you can see on screen just how close it is.
Yeah, no, look, borders are borders. If you want to get into arguments with people, if you want to get into arguments with people in South Kilkenny as to the Kilkenny-Waterford border and Tip Waterford border, look, he's a Laois man. He wore Laois colours. As Cliona says, I suppose one of the things I've really enjoyed about this is finding out more about fellas that you didn't know a whole pile about. And Tommy Murphy, I suppose, is the prime example of that. You would have known the bare bits and bones that most people have known about him before this, but getting ready for this, reading about him, I mean, that is phenomenal. And I suppose the best way, if you just needed one line to justify why he absolutely has to be in it, I mean, to be on that team of the millennium alongside Heffernan, Spillane, O'Connell, fellas like that, I mean, for a county, as I say, who we haven't had massive success in football, to have a fella to be classed in the same category as fellas like that. Look, there's a couple of names football-wise worth discussing who probably narrowly missed out, but I would agree with Cliona 100% that in football it's got to be Tommy Murphy for me as well. Yeah.
In the 80s, the GAA started a thing called the all-time All-Stars, but for players that there wasn't an All-Star series for when they were playing, and he was the second recipient of it. Bill Delaney was also a Laois man who won one of those as well. But he started, I think, as I said, 16-year-old for Laois seniors in 1937, and he played all the way up to 1953. He was on Railway Cup teams. He was just accepted to have been the best midfielder of his time. And as I said, and I remember the rows around the time when the Millennium team, the Millennium was being picked, and all the debates around that, and yet there he is in the middle of it. And I think historically, for that reason, to have somebody whose stature was so great, you'd have to have him on Laois's Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, it's remarkable because we often throw the tag at certain players about who is the best to not win in All-Ireland, and as you said, the only player in that team of the Millennium to have not done so really kind of speaks to how well thought of he was in the 20th century. We might just skip on to your second pick, Cliona. Who have you gone for?
So my second pick is Anne Keenan Buckley, a runner, a cross-country runner predominantly. But when I was growing up, obviously, again, one of these people who, you know, was constantly in the local paper and in the national papers, and a huge source of pride for us. The World Cross Countries in 2003, they celebrated the 30th anniversary, and I remember being at it and getting the book and discovering that she was the third-time all-time representative. She was the third woman in the world who had raced at the World Cross Countries most. But really, what was really interesting about it was, and we forget like the quality of the World Cross Countries. First of all, anybody who's ever run cross country, if you go back to your days in school and you remember the days you tried to duck out when the teacher came looking for you to run cross country, people who run cross country are hard. These are the hardest, some of the hardest. Apart from marathon running, cross country running really tests your mettle. And Anne Keenan Buckley not only represented Ireland 13 times, but she was twice made the top 20 in it. And in 2002, she was 10th overall. And remember, Sonia O'Sullivan was 7th, I think, that year. Ireland, she helped Ireland win a team bronze. She was 40 at the time. She gave up running actually when she became a mother. So she kind of didn't compete for 10 years really. But that was the quality of the woman, that she came 10th in the World Cross Country when she was 40. So you imagine what her career could have been if perhaps she had, you know, hadn't had children or hadn't gone running. And on top of that, then she was an inspirational manager of the Irish athletics cross country team for years. She I think she managed it for 10 years, and in that time, people like Fionnuala Britton won European titles. She was just a brilliant person, brilliant runner, and as I said, I'd love to have seen what else she might have done had her life led her another way.
What's the story, Cliona, about people who, like you mentioned, I did a bit of cross country when I was younger as well. It's an amazing sport to be involved in, but it always felt like stepping stone to actual running.
To track, yeah.
for want of a track, exactly. Absolutely. So what's the story then? Why do
she would have won? Because I think if you love athletics, it is the toughest part of it, if you like. And also her track career was influenced by, she'd won an Irish track 3,000 metre title actually, and then I think her track career kind of stopped because she had children. She kept running cross country, but not as competitively, and then kind of came back to it seriously. So I think again, we don't know how great she would have been on the track, or indeed at marathon running possibly as well. But I just think amongst athletics people, you just understand how hard cross-country runners are. And, you know, I would put her up there, Katrina McKiernan, Sonia O'Sullivan, Fionnuala Britton and Anne Keenan Buckley. And, I mean, we know that at least three of those, we would always recognise them as world-class, and I think she was world-class as well.
No argument, Shane?
Absolutely no argument again. It's she's another one that I've no argument. Unfortunately for you, we'll shortly start to get to loggerheads. But no, look, she's another that I really enjoyed reading up about. I think one of the things Cliona touched on there is it's the longevity. I mean, there was a bit of history of it in the family. So she started at it very young. I think she said she was 10 or 11 when she first went down to Ballyfin Athletics Club, I think it was. But, I mean, to stay going as long as she did, I think, as Cliona said, to be on that team at 40, I think the following year at 41, she was second in the European cross countries. I mean, that's phenomenal. Stephen Miller did a very good interview with her a couple of years back. And in terms of getting back into it at that later stage, I found it interesting. She said the World Cross Countries were coming to Belfast in 99, and she said she had been at it in 79 when John Tracy ran, and I think that was her big motivation to get back training hard and try to have a second kind of burst at it, I suppose.
And remember, like, if people want to understand the quality of that race, when she was 40, that she finished 10th in, Ethiopia's Getawami won it, Paul Radcliffe was third, and Edith Masai was, or Paul Radcliffe was second, Edith Masai was third. Like, that was the quality of that race at the time. As I said, Sonia was 7th. So, like, she was mixing it with the top African runners in the world as well at that stage.
Yeah, someone at the very top of their field, and a proper leash person who was of world class in a given sport.
Yeah, and her own as well, I'd say too. I think her personality as well is what I makes her a leash, somebody who would be representative of leash up there as well. Like, totally low-key, totally humble. Just, you know, it's hard to describe how low-key Anne Keenan Buckley is. But I've seen her manage, as I said, world teams, Irish teams at World and European Championships. And again, you wouldn't know she's in the room, but ask the athletes themselves and they will tell you the influence that she had on them. Just a quiet, powerful, strong presence.
Very, very hard to make a case against your opening two Mount Rushmore picks. So they're both nailed on because we've both got agreement. Right, let's get on to pick number 3, Cliona. Who have you gone for?
Pick number 3 for me is Pat Critchley. I was lucky enough to go to college with him in PE College in Limerick many, many moons ago. He would be recognised, obviously, Laois's only hurling all-star. Brilliant hurler, and was part of that Laois team that made National League semi-finals in the 80s and lost the Centenary Cup to Cork actually in 85 or 84, I think, as well, wasn't it? But brilliant hurler. Brilliant basketball player. I was lucky enough to watch him play basketball and to have seen him play basketball. And Portlaoise is a big basketball town, and they played National League back then. He was part of a Portlaoise team that famously went down to Neptune to Cork and ran them to 7 points or something like that when Portlaoise didn't have any Americans and Neptune did. So just a sensational basketball player, but also the man behind so much success for other people, and he just epitomises that. Vincent Hogan once had a great line about him. He said, I think he was a man who easily retreated from his own reflection. I thought it was a lovely line. You can't. Also, I think the only intercounty player I know who played on stage at Foley, in a very famous band with Cheddar Plunkett was in it as well. I think he played lead hurl at one point. And later, I think, had a triangle and then an accordion. And they were called the Mere Mortals. They were the Drowning Fish initially, I think, and then they became the Mere Mortals. But himself and Cheddar Plunkett, remember as well, were responsible for the revival of Laois hurling, if you like, in the past decade. Started this idea of boy hurlers with the Setanta project, got young kids in Laois back loving hurling again. And he's a very, very, very creative, innovative coach, not just in basketball. He led a schools team in the girls' school in Portlaoise. They won multiple, I think, 11 All-Ireland titles basketball with him. He coached the women's football in Laois. We saw him recently bring Sigerson Cup, bring Carlow IT to Sigerson Cup final. If this man puts his mind to it, there is nothing he can't do. And I particularly think he should be up there for the way that he represents coaches as well.
Looking at some of go on, Adrian, sorry.
Yeah, just in terms of the style, then, Cliona, like you mentioned, innovation as a coach and like the cross section of sport is incredible. Was there anything, a thread common to those? Like sometimes you'll see somebody who's extremely good at one sport will have a lot of traits that can carry across. Any indication of that? Sort of tell us about.
Well, as a player, he was one of these guys who had all the time. You know, those players who always had all the time on the ball that, you know, and even watching him playing basketball. His nickname is Zoom. I think he could probably got it in college. Largely for the fact that he always looks as if he's going at about 0 miles an hour personally, unless you put a ball in front of him. And he was always late for everything in college as well. And I think that was where the nickname came from. But, you know, when you're doing those people who always had time on the ball, you see the time seemed to suspend around him, even when he was playing hurling. And I think it was the same. I think it's the same with the way that he coaches people. He gives people time. He doesn't hustle or hassle anybody. He rarely raises his voice. That's one of the funny things about him. And you listen to people say they rarely hear him curse as well. But when he's, and I just love the way he goes about sport. So much of sport now is so serious, particularly intercounty GA. You know, it's so serious and it's so regimented. And he always had a brilliant sense of humour, but when he needed to, he could totally focus on it. And I think a lot of coaches could learn that from him as well.
His hair is unreal.
Say again?
His hair is unreal.
Lovely hairstyle.
His hair is unreal. You see, if anybody doesn't know him, we're talking Sideshow Bob here. Somebody was suggesting, was it Stephen Miller? Somebody was suggesting as well down in Laois today that they'd need a special sculpture to get his hair up on Mount Rushmore.
The Mere Mortals are pretty cool. Looking at Irish rock, right now and looking at the index of the band, obviously they're a pretty big deal, as you've already touched on, Cliona. I mean, even looking at the lineup that day when they played at Foley, Bob Geldof was actually the headliner that day.
Van Morrison, I think, as well. Yeah.
Right. It's hard to argue against that one as well, Shane, and I think you are going to pop him on. We will get to a debate, I promise, but I think you're going for Critchley as well.
To be honest with John, he'd have been my number one.
Right.
Yeah, he was the first name that I would have put down. I mean, I remember listening to your Donegal version of this, I think it was, and one of the guys might have passed comment that if you cut Michael Murphy in two, he'd be Donegal's best and second best footballer. I think if you cut Pat Critchley in two, he would be on this list just for being Pat Critchley the hurler, and then Pat Critchley, who was all these other things. I mean, bear in mind he won the Club All Ireland in football with Portlaoise.
There's only one, yeah.
The basketball achievements that he's had, sensational. And now as a coach, I mean, as somebody myself who's obsessed with coaching and I suppose the pedagogy of coaching and everything that goes with it. I mean, if you go back to Owen's question as to what skill had he that was transferable across all of those, he's a people person, and he's got an unbelievable ability to connect with you, the person, before he even considers you, the athlete. I'm involved with Portlaoise Soccer Club at the moment, and we had a series of seminars where we got a guest in to talk, and we managed to get Pat in, and you know, the manner in which he speaks about connecting with the person first and helping them flourish in their lives, not just in their sport, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, you're hanging on his every word. You're absolutely hanging on his every word. So it's no surprise. I mean, I think recently he won 2 national titles in 2 different sports in the same day there, with the basketball in the school and then with the footballers in Carlow IT, which was phenomenal. Cheddar did a podcast recently there with Brian Carroll, where he spoke about him as a player and how fantastic a player he was. He used one brilliant line. He said, "I've heard midfielders been described as going box to box." He says, Zoom, he said, went from parish to parish. Good way of putting across the energy that he played the game with, you know. And again, the other great thing with him, lads, is he'd be such a respected name around the country in terms of hurling. I mean, he's, you know, very much a foremost thinker. Cliona was talking there about the Setanta program and how he was the driving force behind that. Like, I read a piece with Christy O'Connor last year when after we beat Dublin, Christy had a good piece about, well, where did this come from? And he spoke about the Setanta program and spoke about Critchley being the one that was bringing that in. But he also said that in 2014, when things were really struggling at underage level for the Cork hurlers, it was Pat Critchley that the Cork hurlers turned to, looking for information as to, well, how you seem to be doing this a lot better than we are. How are you getting this so right? So look, when Cork hurling knowledge and are coming knocking on your doorstep, you're clearly a highly respected figure, you know, everywhere. He
when he was an under 21, I think he was still in college at the time. He played on 15 teams in one season between club, college, and county football, basketball, and hurling. So you know, he was just. To me, like, he is a sporting polyglot in every sense of the word, and I think if every county had a treasure like Pat Critchley, a lot of the nonsense would be stripped away, and just you would be talking about, you know, proper coaching, proper handling of people, and also, I don't know whether you'd agree, Steve, but he also had, to me too, he has that Laois personality. Everything is very on the down low, very understated, and that's why you cling on to every word.
Yeah, I think the phrase "you wouldn't find anybody to have a bad word to say about him" is kind of used too often, but I think it's definitely applicable in Critchley's case. That's for sure.
Well, there's one more spot remaining on Mount Rushmore. I can confirm, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not actually going to be an agreement here. So, Cliona, you may as well proceed and give us your final pick for your Mount Rushmore.
Well, I looked at a lot of people, and I know like Bina McDonald was one that was a huge hero of mine as a GA fan. I also looked obviously at women's GA, and Sue Ramsbottom was sensational for me as well. But I'm plumping for Alison Miller because I think she's somebody who, if you mention Laois sport, her name will come up immediately. Somebody who came to rugby very late in her life, somebody who's won 2 Six Nations, scored, a hat-trick against England, famously the year that Ireland won the Grand Slam, and also scored a try in that famous victory in the World Cup against the All Blacks, the Silver Ferret. So for me, Alison Miller, I think, is one that again represents that eclectic nature of Laois sport, because she didn't start out as a rugby player, and she came to GA very late, but played for Laois GA as well, and was actually a brilliant athlete. She'd won 2 All-Ireland schools 400-metre hurdles titles, and she has that power sprinting ability that you've seen as a rugby player. But I think if you think about Irish rugby and you mention Alison Miller, everybody knows who you're talking about, and just that trademark speed that she had and that lovely handoff. And I just think she was just one of those players you'd pay in to go to watch.
So she's absolutely class. Like, she's 8 or 9 out of 10 every single game. I'm delighted that you've not only mentioned Cliona, but put her up there. She's like frequently head and shoulders, not only above the opposition, but above her own teammates as well. So
yeah, I think record 24 tries as well, Adrian. Yeah, for Ireland.
I'm not sure which direction Shane is going to go here, by the way, so I don't want to be sort of getting in ahead of me. But I can't believe how flippantly and briefly you've brushed over Sue Ramsbottom.
Oh, look, I debated long and hard about this, because Sue Ramsbottom again represents everything that was brilliant about Laois for me, because the Laois women were in the vanguard of, ladies Gaelic football started in 74, and Laois women were in 6 finals before they finally won one in 2001. And I think she played in at least maybe 7 finals. I think she played in 6 of them, and they lost them, including heartbreaking replays. And so she was finally there. She was there in 2001 and leading, as she always did. I think she scored 7-17 in that season, and she scored maybe 4 points in play in that final, and she scored and some brilliant goals. I remember she scored an amazing goal against Monaghan one year in a drawn final that they lost the replay. Just sensational player, sensational leader, and again, so many people in Laois would mention her in relation to influencing them in sport as well. But I suppose, because I believe that we're trying to get a spread for me, Mt Rushmore is about reflecting a spread of sport, and for that reason I've just plumped for Ali Miller, and the international element of that, I suppose, beforehand. But really, it was neck and neck. I found it hard myself. She
won an All-Ireland club title in 1986 at the age of 12, senior at the age of 12.
She scored a point in it, apparently.
Stop.
Actually, it was the Heath at the time. Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Cliona, we might just get a brief roundup of who else didn't make your mountain before we get Shane's final pick.
Well, Bina McDonald didn't make mine, and but just a sensational footballer, probably the best footballer I saw play for, played for Laois. Famously was a minor. Did the Michael Murphy thing. Was a minor the year that he was first picked for the Laois seniors. Was part of the Laois team that contested 3 and won 2 All Ireland minor finals, and contested an under-21 final, and then part of the great team in 2003 they made the breakthrough at Mcneill. Just a brilliant player, dual-footed, everything he had about him, and also back to that understated thing about Laois as well. Actually did a really interesting interview recently, I think on the White Line, that podcast, where he said that he actually suffered from a lot of anxiety, which is really interesting, because he was a guy I felt that could even have been better, and I wasn't sure that he was always played in the right position, but he was definitely one for me. I know Jerry Culleton was mentioned by a few people as well. Played rugby for Ireland and got banned from playing GA and went back to playing hurling. And led his club to a junior title. There too, that were obviously would have been contenders there. And TJ Donny as well, obviously boxing world champion, is one definitely has to be mentioned.
So Shane, analysing Cliona's final pick with Alison Miller on the mountain, is it going to be something you're going to change, or who had you in mind for your final spot?
Yeah, well, look, I think the first thing to point out is I don't know what it says about Laois as a sporting county, but we've ended up almost identical. So we have, in that when push came to shove, I probably had Alison Miller in 5th place. So I did. So it's you know, it's crazy how similar the two of us have turned out. Again, I'll throw a few names out first, just again in terms of consideration before I come to it. I mean, on the hurling front, somebody that Cliona and myself would be aware of Jack Nolan is kind of the Dion of all things GEA down in Laois with us. He would argue, if he was on here now, he would argue very, very, very strongly for Christy O'Brien, who was a phenomenal hurler for Laois. We're going back a bit further, all right, but an absolutely phenomenal hurler for Laois. 18 years with them, massively prominent in Railway Cups, and last year it was absolutely fantastic to see on the day that Laois won the Joe McDonagh last year. Christy was inducted into the Leinster Hurling Hall of Fame, which was absolutely brilliant to see as well. John Taylor, again, you know, Cheddar recently described him as the best player he's ever seen hurl for Laois, so that in itself is saying something. And given the recent success that we've had and how good things went last year, I think if we're doing this in another 5 to 10 years' time, I think Enda Rowland will have a real claim to being up in that list. He's a phenomenal goalkeeper. I think he's the best goalkeeper in the country at the moment. I think he's in an age bracket that he's going to continue to be the best goalkeeper in the country for a few years to come. Football-wise, definitely the two current ones, obviously, were Bino and Ross. But going back a bit further, I think a lot of people would say that Bobby Miller would have a claim to be on it. Nominated for 4 All-Stars in a row in the 70s, and it then also gives us the distinction that I wouldn't think there's too many counties where, you know, if you're doing your top 10, that you'd have a father and daughter combination in your top 10 with Alison obviously already making Cliona's list. Yeah, we unfortunately have no pedigree with soccer. We've had one Irish international, senior Irish international. He's from my own town of Rathdowney, a guy called Tony Byrne. He could pick up 14 caps, would have been 10 years with Southampton. But yeah, aside from that, apart from a couple
if you're claiming Carlos Tommy Murphy, surely you're going to claim Stephen Hunt.
Nah. Look,
I didn't even know he was born in Laois until a few days ago.
Yeah. I know Stephen very, very well. I know him well enough to know that he doesn't consider himself a Laois man. So if he's not considering himself a Laois man, we're definitely not.
I was on to him last night to see was there any case to be made, and he has very fond things to say about it, and his mother's family is from there, but he's very firmly, I think, for the family down there. Where have you ended up?
Yeah. No, look, the one I've gone with, again, I was kind of looking at the modern era, and it is a name that came back a good bit on Twitter when I threw it out as well. And it's just a guy that I think has gone and been phenomenally successful in leaving our country, is Zach Toohey. I mean, what he's done going across to Australia, I mean, it's the equivalent. The way I'm looking at it is, if we did have a soccer player who went off to England and carved out a phenomenal career for himself in an environment that's as tough as that. And right, you might say, well, there's world stars in the Premier League now, so you know he's not competing with world players by playing Aussie rules and playing the AFL. But even if you went back to the Premier League or for old First Division as it was called in the 80s, I mean, what Zach is doing now to go across there, I mean, 187 appearances, it leaves him third behind only two men in Jim Steins and Ty Kennelly. It's absolutely phenomenal. And at the moment is still at the height of his powers. I mean, this year they brought back the State of Origin, AFL State of Origin match, and he was the only non-Australian selected in that, in which he gave an absolutely starring performance. He's back fit after he picked up an injury last year which ended 138 consecutive games. I mean, that in itself is an incredible stat in any sport. So it is. So that caused a bit of a problem for him in 2019. But he's back at the moment. He's with Geelong at the moment, who are kind of third, fourth favourites if their season gets back underway, which I think they're hopeful of. There's a hell of a chance that he will finally win a title this year. And I think if he does, what'll happen there is he'll return to Laois and hopefully make a starring role for a couple of years for ourselves before he packs it in. Because, of course, he did win a Leinster minor with Laois before he went across. But absolutely phenomenal athlete. And, I mean, if you if you throw his name out in Australia amongst that community, they will all say that he is one of the best they've had in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So I think that puts him in with a serious chance of being one of the best we've ever had.
Well, it's in your hands, Shane. If you want to get Zach Toohey onto your Mount Rushmore, you're going to have to remove Tommy Murphy, Anne Keenan-Buckley, Pat Critchley or Alison Miller. Are you going to do it?
Can I just say, in the absence of that, like Laois, it struck me as the conversation was going along, is an incredible county for female athletes and sports people in a way that I'm not sure we've had replicated up to this point. And outside of sports, some incredibly strong women as well. So what I'm saying to you is, let that influence your decision, Shane.
No, I don't think it should influence his decision. I mean, fair is fair here. This is gender neutral, so it's up to him.
Yeah, no, look, that's absolutely a fair argument. So it is, and look, if there had been a bit more disagreement between myself and Cliona on the other picks, well, then I don't think I would have felt as obliged to try and look outside the box a little bit more and try to go to war for somebody. But yeah, look, I think virtue of the fact that Alison was Cliona's last pick, I suppose that is really the only one that I can challenge. And yeah, I'd be looking to put Zach in ahead of Alison Miller, I suppose, as much and all of the backlash that no doubt I will take for that.
Well, it's a lose-lose situation. Somebody's going to miss out. So just to confirm, the final OTB Laois Mount Rushmore is Tommy...
Unless Owen, and sorry to cut across you, if there's any changes from Cliona's point of view that you would want to make.
Unless I'm agreeing to change here. I'll tell you what, for me, I'm biased. This is absolutely my bad. I don't like the AFL as a game, and so I don't follow it as closely as I should. I didn't know about the State of Origin thing. That's absolutely amazing, because State of Origin is massive. I've been at State of Origin matches in Australia, and there's huge respect there. But he hasn't won an AFL title yet, and for that reason I think Alison Miller's been part of historic rugby teams representing Ireland, and I think on that basis I would still keep her on Mount Rushmore for the next 12 months anyway.
Shane does get to make that one change, so if he's insisting on Zach, he is going up. And are you have you any change to your 4 on that basis, or would you just stick with that and under duress have Alison come off then in place of Zach? Is there agreement on that, in so much as it is?
Well, I don't think you're going to get agreement, that's for sure.
Yeah,
reluctant agreement.
What was it Thatcher said? This lady's not for turning, was it?
and look at that. That's legit. But so you're sticking with your 4. Shane is going to push Zach in there, and he's choosing to do it at Alison's expense, and that's where we're landing, it seems.
Yeah, and look, let the battle begin. We'd love to get loads more input from other sports fans, and obviously from Laois sports fans as well.
Whereabouts in the county is it being etched out, Cliona?
Oh, without a doubt. Never mind Mount Rushmore. It has to be on the Rock of Dunamace. There's no doubt about it. One of the most beautiful parts and places in Laois that, again, like a lot of Laois, like the bogs of Laois and a lot of other things about Laois, is probably underappreciated by other people, because we are in that middle ground in the middle of the country that is, I think, underappreciated. The beautiful Midlands. But the Rock of Dunamace is where I carve it out.
At least it's in Laois as well, Cliona, unlike Tommy Murphy.
There you have it. The Rock of Dunamace, Tommy Murphy, Anne Keenan-Buckley, Pat Critchley and Zach Toohey. That's one fine-looking Mount Rushmore. Fair play, folks. That's it for the Laois Mount Rushmore.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
You almost managed to persuade them into a bit of politicking there, Adrian, but you weren't successful in the end.
Yeah, I'd always I would share Cliona's viewpoint that, don't let this change your opinion. But actually, in that case, do please let this change your opinion, because it is actually an incredible county for powerful women on the sports field and elsewhere as well. And I think it would have been... I also think that actually is a straight call, regardless of that. I'd probably still go for Alison Miller. She's one of the most impressive rugby players I've ever seen. She's truly an incredible player. I'm sure that now that women's rugby is on the TV with great regularity, people will be very much aware of her. But she's an absolute powerhouse. I'd have no reluctance to have her up there at all. But look, that's where we've ended on. We've ended with the wrong decision, but that's how these things go.
Right, before we go this morning, we just want to let you know that OTB are partnering up with BMW and Triathlon Ireland to take part in the Run and Ride for Pieta, which is a cycle and run challenge that is supporting Pieta House and is proudly supported by BMW Ireland. Both our fit and slightly unfit team of OTB presenters will be taking on the challenge over 6 weeks with regular updates throughout, culminating in a live broadcasting of the duathlon on our sports breakfast show, OTB AM. We'll be getting nutrition, running and cycling experts on the show over the coming weeks to give us some well-needed tips, and we'll have weekly prizes to give away courtesy of both BMW and Triathlon Ireland. Adrian, this is where you come to the fore yet again and show us all what you're made of.
You're doing it on, are you?
I don't think so, but I will be interested in seeing. I just haven't. Simple as that. It's I will be supporting.
I mean, it's a duathlon, and it heavily relies on the sport that you've come to know and love and become very much an expert at over the last 12 months with cycling. I would have thought this was your forte.
Well, on that note, that is it from OTB AM this morning. Have a great weekend, Adrian. I hope it's thoroughly enjoyable. Thanks a million for you at home joining us this week. Coming up on OTB tonight and over the weekend, we've got plenty for you. Joseph O'Brien is joining the lads for Friday night racing. On Saturday's Off the Ball, World Cup Revisited is focusing on the 1978 World Cup with Dan McDonnell and Johnny Ward as ever, and an FAI coaching panel, which will be very interesting. Niall O'Regan, who is Head of Coach Education, Jason Donoghue, Republic of Ireland Under-15s Manager, and Pearl Slattery, Shell's Captain and Women's Development Officer, will be on that panel with John. It's live Sunday from 1 to 7 as well on Off the Ball. If you missed anything this morning, you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast network. We've got our Laois Mt Rushmore, of course. Alan Quinlan was on chatting rugby earlier, and Aaron Cunningham did a great piece with us on the ground in New York. So just subscribe to OTB AM wherever you get your podcasts, or better still, go and download the brand new OTB Sports app. It's our new home, and it's got everything we do up there. Go and download it and let us know what you think. Enjoy your weekend.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB AM.
I was happy with how I was performing off the back of the first two games. Obviously, didn't go to plan against England, which was good, but it